guys, I should be live. I'm just gonna wait for it to pop up here on my phone. I pulled us some cards I thought we would start with. Okay, the little alert just went. I pulled some cards I thought we would start with. Welcome to another episode of Books and Buds, where I know nothing about books and nothing about buds. I'm just kidding. This is just a chill space for me to kind of do what makes me happy, which is, get stoned and read books. Okay, the sound is good. I do want to preface this one with saying that I'm going to butcher so many words in this book, from the Latin to the Portuguese. The author is actually from Brazil. French, Latin, Portuguese, all of the stages of alchemy. I cannot say any of those to save my life. So, oh my God, the Welsh. Oh God, I apologize to my ancestors and every culture's dialect, which I am going to mutilate tonight as I attempt to navigate this book. But we'll look things up. We'll look things up if I really want to know how to pronounce them. But we're just going to kind of roll with it. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves in the chat, feel free. If not, you don't have to. Okay, I don't have the chat up on my phone for a reason, just my face. So give me a second. The whole point of this is so you can see the chat. All right, so I pulled some cards that I thought we would start with. Hi, Leslie. While we wait for people to kind of hop in, I don't want to jump right into the book. So, hello. Okay, let me go over here where my face is in real time because I'm on a delay over there. Okay, so the book we're going to dive into tonight is The Grail, Arthur and His Knights. But before we do, I want to go a couple of places. So first, I pulled some cards. I pulled an archetype card, and I was when I was shuffling, I was focusing on, what is the archetype? Oh, this book is really good, Leslie. I've read this one already. It's, of course, from Tavis over at Esoteric Circle. I buy lots of books from him that are really good, but this one blew my mind. It's really good. It's really good. So I pulled an archetype card and I was like, all right, so what, you guys know I'm trying to do this with a purpose, right? So we're reading half the book tonight. And the reason why I picked this book in particular is because we just started a new zodiacal cycle in Aries season, that birth of the individual. We have a new quest being ignited. And really, and we're going to pull a chart later and kind of talk a little bit more about this. But really, astrology, I believe, is this process of individuation and then the shedding of that individual identity and being merged back with the whole. That's the whole process of Aries up to Pisces, right? And so we're really starting this quest of individuation once more. And the first half of this book really does focus on that aspect of it. And we're going to leave off in the middle on the chapter entitled something along the lines of The Grail and Its Mysteries, or The Grail and Its Questions. And next month, we are going to be having a blood moon in Scorpio. So a lunar eclipse in Scorpio, Scorpio being the sign of the mysteries and its secrets, and being a blood moon eclipse. So I think it'll be a really great time to dive deeper into the mystery aspect. So we're going to pick up halfway through. But you guys know I want to have some sort of purpose as to why we're reading this, associated with the current astrological archetypal energy and how we can dive deeper into it so that we can kind of embody it, right? And so while shuffling, I asked what is the archetype we are trying to integrate and really embody throughout this evening, or our next 2 evenings, however long it takes us to read this book. And the card that came out was the Mystic, which is, ultra aligned, right? We see the butterfly, like igniting its spark of consciousness within this darkness of the unconscious, right? And being like reborn with that sight, that mystic sight, which we can see here with the two eyes, like one up at the top and one up at the bottom, which also signifies being able to kind of like see from both ends of the polarity, from this dark, unconscious, preconscious, subconscious, intuitive realm, and also this like inner light of knowing. That is what the mystic is. I have this like quote I wrote at some point, which I'm going to butcher my own words. It's something along the lines of like, the mystic's goal is to find that sort of middle ground where you're navigating through enough darkness to swim in the mysteries and enough light to kind of see what's there. And that's kind of what I see here in this card. So we're going to read it from the book and see what they have to say. That's kind of what I see. This is perfect for where we're going here tonight. Leslie says, that's so cool. Arthur came to her mind a week or so ago. Yeah, I also should preference this with saying I'm like legitimately obsessed with Arthurian legends for like my whole life. It was like one of my first obsessions, and it's never left. And it's one of the ones that Eddie shares. Like, he's not super into all the occult stuff or even really astrology. I don't think he can really follow along with what I'm saying. But he will sit there and watch anything and everything on the Arthurian legends in Atlantis. So we've seen everything when it comes to that. And it's just been something that's followed me my whole life. But we're going to read a little bit out of another book before we dive into that book that kind of speaks to why I think I've been so obsessed with it. So let's read this first. The Mystic. The Seeker, the Dreamer. The mystic is often misunderstood in our culture, depicted as a wanderer or a light-hearted daydreamer. Yet, like Shiva, the true mystic plays a critical role in society, remaining fearlessly dedicated to the path of transformation. In order to save the earth from darkness, Shiva swallows the poison of the world and holds it in his throat, slowly transmuting the liquid into nectar. This is the work of the mystic. They do not fear darkness, but rather sit in the presence of it, harness the potential and latent energy behind it, and embed it with light. They are patient and prudent change makers, seeking growth above all else. Unanswerable questions are the mystic's lifeblood. The mystic revels in the mystery, in the great riddle of life, dancing with the forces of light and dark upon its wings. Like it says light worker. I really do not like that word. And I think we're working through a multi-spectrum of projection. You know, I don't know. I don't like light worker. I want to change that, but I can't think of something else. I'm just going to say like the mystic, I guess. It says the mystic must build a relationship with fire. Oh, I have a whole tip on this I was going to go on to here at some point. It says here the mystic must build a relationship with fire. This begins by awakening the inner flame within. God, I hope I remember to come back to that point I want to make. It says here that it may seem that the mystic is inward facing, yet its light beams back to the world with the strength of 1,000 stars. When this archetype is evolved, it is I don't like this. It says remover of darkness. I would change that to like integrator of darkness. A visionary, ageless. When this archetype is in its lower manifestation, though, it expects results, seeks attention and recognition. So before I go on that fire tip, this next card speaks to that, so we'll go ahead and read that first. So I've been using these two decks together. These are my two favorite decks right now. I hardly ever use the actual tarot anymore. I've been using this Wild Unknown Archetypes deck like religiously with all my readings, all my videos. It never lets me down. It's not always great for reading for yourself, but I don't usually read for myself. And then I've been pairing it with this wild harmonic oracle, which are not made by the same people, even though they are both round and have this like wild in the title. You'd think they are, but they are not. And so I kind of have been pulling them like, okay, what is the archetype we're trying to integrate and really embody? And then I use this card for the how. Like how do we do that, right? And the card that came out speaks very much to connecting to that element of fire, of consciousness, of spirit, and sparking that rebirth of the individual and quest back home to the whole, ultimately. And the card that came out is the Fire of Spirit, Talismanic Access. It looks very Celtic and like it's iconography as well. It's not going to focus. My camera is supposed to be good, but I don't think I have the settings on right. Never works right. Sorry, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and read this really quick. The Fire of Spirit. As the driving will ascends into the spirit of creativity, the formation of means comes to be. Tools that liberate, unlocking powers, ingenuity, and clever perspectives that facilitate new abilities. This card reminds me that everything is a permission slip of one kind or another. To create what I want to create, I need to both find/create the right tools and develop the skills to use them. Develop the individual, right? The body, this is Taurus season, very much focused on the body, the physical reality, this like earth school realm of physicality, right? The body gives me a portal through which to experience the earth. The magic wand grants me the ability to cast my spells. Modern vehicles give me teleportation. The telephone gives me telepathy. All are inherent abilities that I find ways of making real via what I have to work with. Inquiry. What do I want to make real? And what tools/circumstances/state of mind will facilitate that happening? It's a really good thing to ask during Taurus season, because Taurus is the sign of like all of the resources that we need to make our vision into reality and to manifest things into physicality. Taurus is where we get all of like the resources, whether it be financial or physical, whatever it is that we need to have that sense of security and safety in order to create. So let's see what you said here. Have you seen the Sleeping Kings videos from Gigi Young? I have not seen the Sleeping Kings videos from Gigi Young. I have seen a lot of Gigi Young's work. I don't usually vibe with people's opinions, because I have somebody of my own. And I don't really watch a lot of people's content, but I do not agree with everything Gigi has to say, but the vast majority of her work I really, 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 really vibe with, but I have not seen those videos. But I do like her work. I'm a really big fan of her In Plain Sight series. Okay, so before we get into that book, I just want to read a page out of this Dion Fortune book. It's called Esoteric Orders and Their Work. So I was just looking into like the publishing date on this. So apparently this was published in the 60s, but like she died in the 40s. So this was published after her death by the Society of Inner Light, one of the kind of like public mystery schools that she created. She was also a member of like Theosophy and stuff. I don't vibe with a lot of the language in here. Her work is really rooted in like Freemasonry, and she's aligned very strongly with the beliefs of Aleister Crowley as well. But there is a lot of valuable information in this book. Just do want to preference that with saying this, I do not condone everything said in here. As you will see by the opening line of what I'm about to read here, like the way she words, the way she looks at like muggles, I guess you could say. But this is, the reason why I want to read this is because it talks about learning the lessons of your faith. And it kind of like sparked this train of inquiry. So I want to read this and then kind of go off on a little tip. So it says here, the individual savage, yeah, that's kind of where she stands, may be capable of benefiting from information, or he may not, from education, or he may not. It depends upon his capacity. The average man may be capable of benefiting from initiation, like initiation into the mysteries, or he may not. It also depends on his capacity. But each individual should have the opportunity of advancing to the highest development of which he is capable. A certain degree of evolution must be reached, though, before initiation becomes operative. A student does not enter upon postgraduate course until he has graduated. Therefore, it is the function of the exoteric religion to see to it that each member of the race reaches the normal standard of evolution. It has to seek the lost sheep and raise the submerged tenth. Until a man has learnt the lessons of his faith, he is not ready for the lessons of initiation. And so she's talking mostly about exoteric religions, right? And why these things are important, and why, that we need to have a rooting in some sort of doctrine in order to then start to unlock the esoteric secrets of said doctrine, right? And she goes, I'm going to read the rest of this page, but, that's what she's touching on. But it had me thinking, like, what is my faith? Like, what is the lessons of my faith? And then I started thinking about all of the things that I was obsessed with my whole life, even before I knew there was, like, esoteric undertones to said things. Like, for instance, I wrote here, like, lessons of my faith. They're the myths that I've been obsessed with my whole life, right? These stories, these legends, whether it's Robin Hood or the Sword in the Stone or anything connected to the Arthurian legends, Merlin. For me, it was really Harry Potter, right? Like, think about it. Like, what is my faith? I'm a cosmic space witch, right? And so these are the things that really gave me this footing, this basis of exoteric information in order for me to then expand turn my esoteric lens onto it. A big movie for me was The Dark Crystal. I was really into that movie, and then one day I just was like, oh, like, this movie makes so much sense once you have this background. And so I started thinking about, like, what are the lessons of my faith? And, these are the lessons of, with great power comes great responsibility. The dangers of, magic, and the exerting your will and finding alignment and balance. All of these things are told through these stories. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this chapter, but that's why I wanted to dive into this book. And by the way, the only reason Books and Bongs, or was Books and Bongs, but I changed it to Books and Buds because I thought the algorithm would think I was talking about, like, your buddy. Hi, Fally. So the only reason we're even here doing this is because of this book. This book sparked this whole thing. I'm reading this book and I'm like, this book is so good. I want to read the whole thing to my Patreon members. And so then I was like, maybe I should just start a YouTube thing while you do that. And this book started the whole thing. It's very good. So let's finish this and then we'll get into the lessons of our faith, right? Hey guys. Okay, so it says here that the function of the lesser mysteries, so the more exoteric, lens with which to view truly esoteric doctrine, right? It is the function of the lesser mysteries to enable each individual admitted to their teaching to attain the highest degree of development of which he is capable. That individuation process that this book is going to dive very heavily into. In the lesser mysteries are unfolded the latent capacities of man, but in the greater mysteries are unfolded the hidden capacities of nature. The lesser mysteries deal with the objective sphere, while the greater mysteries with the objective sphere. Subjective, objective. I think I mixed that up. And the one is the essential preliminary to the other. It is not possible for man to command the elemental essence of nature unless he is the master of the elemental aspects of his own nature. For the powers within, if rebellious, will betray him to the powers without. Discipline must precede dominion. We operate upon that which is without by the corresponding aspect that is within. So that pretty much sums up what this book is going to help us kind of do. It's going to focus on both these like inner aspects and how to kind of like navigate the world while trying to develop the individual, and focus on all of the different like symbolic representations of this like esoteric story and all the different layers of it. All right, so I think we covered all the stuff. I am going to smoke a little bit of weed, and then we're going to dive into this book. I'm going to read the back. I'm going to read, you guys bear with me with trying to pronounce a lot of these things. Even like the woman's name, I don't know how to say that. Maria Zelina de Alvarenga. No, it's so wrong. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Okay. We'll look some things up because that's kind of how I do it. You guys like my rose quartz little pipe? I got this on Etsy back when you could buy them with a card. And then I heard that they stopped being allowed to sell pipes with cards. But that was a while ago. It might be different now. Who out there is smoking with me? Am I the only one? Is everybody like all stoned out from 420? I told Eddie yesterday, I was like, roll us one of those big joints for 420. And I just meant one of those like big ones that he rolls like this. And this guy like rolled multiple papers together. This thing was like, I'm not even joking. It was the size of this. It was this. This is like literally what it looked like. I should have taken a picture, but my phone was dead. Okay, so this woman is super great. Valley has an amethyst pipe like that. It's really rad. I need a new little screen thing though. What's the food through it? Leslie has one in lapis. Oh my god, of course we all do, right? We're like, yeah, of course we all have crystal pipes. All the stoner witches out there. Yay, Leslie. Okay, you guys, I'm very excited to read this. Okay, we're going to leave off on chapter 9. It's called The Grail and Its Questions. Okay, let's read the back of the book first. This little blurb is written by one of her little Jungian analyst friends. This book was written in 2013 by a woman. I think that's why I like it so much, is because it does have that like modern female lens about it, when a lot of like Jungian analytical writings were done more in like the 30s, the 40s, and by men, and the language is still like the female is something to kind of like conquer. They look at it better, but still not the way I do. But she does a really great job. I like her a lot. Okay, the back. Stay focused, Allie. Hi, friend. Okay, so Jung described the process of individuation applied to the individual, he himself, throughout his life. Showed us how the evolution of his thought was recorded in his rich work. Later, Jungians described the process of individuation as also applied to culture, an important development of our understanding of cultural phenomenon. In the Grail, Arthur and His Knights, a symbolic Jungian reading, published in English here for the first time, Maria, I'm just going to call her Maria rather than butcher her name every single time. Maria reveals how the individuation of the work is accompanied and followed by the process of the individuation of the author. You can really feel that as she's writing, and I hope that my Patreon members can feel that with me as I am putting out content and connecting with you guys each moon, because I really do try to actually talk, like, live what I'm saying, you know, and be real and honest and, you know, like a real person, not like a lot of like online people or whatever who, or spiritual online people in particular, who, you know, think they have all the answers and know all the things. Like, I don't know. I have so many questions. Like, I'm just like, that's why I like to have the questions. So anyway, and I really could feel that in her work, that like she was living this, and the like having this whole experience as these characters were, as she was like decoding and symbolically constructing her like thesis for the like archetypal story that is behind these legends. Okay. Anyone who reads her work will see the richness of her thought and approach. She possesses a privileged intuition and an accurate and deep sensibility, and takes us on a memorable journey with the Grail, Arthur, and his knights. If, as the author says in her discussion of Percival, not asking the question is to lose oneself and not fulfill one's destiny, then she herself in this work has raised the questions necessary to embark on the journey. As Percival, the pure, naive fool, says to others, "Go as far as we went, and then you will know. On that day, we will stop telling stories and become legends ourselves." In this sense, Maria has herself become a legend, and in individualizing the story of the Grail, her book makes the reading itself a new adventure, and to this adventure, I invite all readers. And that was written by a Jungian analyst and founding member of the Brazilian Society of Analytical Psychology. His last name is Galeas. I can't pronounce his first name. It starts with an I. Okay. So I tried to find out some stuff about this author. Like I said, this book was written in 2013. She is a Brazilian. I gotta put my glasses on, guys. I can't read for this long without it. But the glare is gonna like really annoy me. I don't know. We'll see how long this lasts. She is a Brazilian Jungian psychiatrist. So a prescribing doctor. And there's not much. You can't find anything other than really what is written here in her little about the author. So we're just going to read this. I tried to find it and see if she wrote any other books, and I couldn't find anything, but here it says she wrote 2 others, so I'm probably going to buy those, and we're probably going to read those at some point, because I am, like I said, a fan. So, Maria Zelia de Alvarenga. Okay. She was born in 1940. She is still alive. She is a medical psychiatrist. She graduated from the Medicine School of São Paulo University and is accredited as a Jungian analyst by SBPA, which it's in Portuguese, guys. I don't know what it stands for. It stands for the International Association of Analytical Psychology. She also has a passion for mythology, which you can tell she is well-versed, big fan of her work. As editor of the Jungian magazine, she has published numerous articles. She is the author of this book, The Grail, Arthur and His Knights. She has also written Oedipus, The hero without divine protection, and Odysseus, the hero of cunning, with co-author Silvia Baptista. Maria is also the author and editor of the book titled Symbolic Mythology, Structures of Psyche and Mythical Regencies. It says it in Portuguese and then English, so I have to skip ahead. Which is published in both Portuguese and Spanish. All of these books were published in Sao Paulo, Brazil. She took part in Latin American Congress of Jungian Psychology, and she won a whole bunch of awards. And she remains with the Institute as a collaborative teacher. She's married, has 6 children, and currently 9 grandchildren. She also keeps an analyst's office in Sao Paulo and lives near Sao Paulo in San Jose dos Campos. The foreword is actually written by her son, which I think is the cutest and most Arthurian thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. It's adorable, and his name is Thomas, which is ironically the middle name of my future son, who will be here at some point. Let me see what you guys are saying. She said she needs to check the Patreon, still supporting monthly, but haven't visited in a while. All the videos are there for replay when you guys want to catch up. And you guys know, even though they're, about the current astrology, which it doesn't apply anymore, I'm always diving into all kinds of rabbit holes, so each video is still, relative. That's not the word I'm looking for, but whatever. I'm already stoned, you guys. The dark crystal was super enlightening for me as well. So good. Oh yeah, I've seen some really dope crystal pipes, but I'm a blunt girl, lol. Yeah, the dark crystal, that was the one that that one's so good. That's a good one. Okay, so I'm going to read the foreword. Like I said, this is written by her son. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to write the preface of this book written by my mother. The idea of translating this book into English dates back to 1999, when I came back to England to visit my host family as an exchange student in the UK in 1995 to 1996. I had the pleasure of meeting and living with John and Sherry Whately, an extraordinary couple in their late 70s and survivors from World War II. John, with his exceptional education, seemed curious and disappointed when I gave him the first edition of the Grail in Portuguese, since there is no English version then. Every time I had the chance to meet or talk to John, he used to ask for the translation of this book. Unfortunately, we could not get it translated before his death in 2005. Poor John, he didn't get to read this book translated for him. 5 years later, I had the chance to return to England to study for a master's at Cambridge University. It was then that my mother, John and Sherry's daughter, and I went to Cornwall to visit King Arthur's ruins, our magical so-called ruins. They can't actually prove any of this. I know. I've tried. We'll get there. She gets there in here. Okay. Our magical experience there reinforced the desire to publish the Grail in English. By that time, we already had a translated version of this book, and I started to look for editors interested in publication. Just before returning home, my mother got an email from, I want to know this guy's sign, because this is the least heartfelt introduction to a book I've ever read. Oh, he's probably like a Capricorn. Karnak Books, saying that they were interested in publishing it. What a great surprise. Indeed, this new conquest of my mother makes me very proud of her. The soul of this book is related to the English world, and there was no sense in not having it published in English. Everyone has a Grail to look for. For this reason, I recommend reading this book to everyone. Thomas Lima. All right, let's dive in. This is the introduction. It starts off with a quote from the author. Life holds all moments and also the time for each moment to occur for all of us. So, like, time is all of it, and it's also, like, right now, this moment. Storytelling is magical by nature and transforms and fascinates those who listen as much as those who tell stories. Formation and fascination are movements that heal the soul. Therefore, when two or more people meet to tell and listen to stories, like us, divinity is present and miracles happen. Lisa says, random Jungian thought. Ever think of the whole twin flame obsession is caused? It's just a person being your living anima animus, but they get attached to the person and not realize it's all just energy. Yeah, it sounds like he at least has Capricorn or Virgo placements. Yeah, there's some Virgo there too. Yes, Lisa, yeah. And I think that is kind of what it is, you know? I hate that terminology, but I do, Eddie and I have had some very weird, metaphysical, weird things happen that, you know, or as a parent that we're supposed to be doing something here together, you know? Weird, like, visions come through trips or whatever, you know? And I do think that is what we do. Like, he mirrors back to me all of the shit that I cannot see, so I have to work through it, and I do the same for him. And, you know, it's not, like, sunshine and rainbows. It's like so much work. Girl, I speak fluent typo. Like, you could have spelled every word wrong in that sentence, and if you spelled it phonetically, I would have known what you were saying. What was I saying? Anyway, yeah, that's kind of what this is. You know, it's not sunshine and rainbows. It's like, oh, well, you know, we're supposed to do a lot of the work. And so you need to have that, like, reflection of that which you cannot see, right? So we're gathering to read stories, and divinity is present. Okay, the mystical traditions of different races have, over centuries, developed into a series of narratives, considered to be sacred texts, and often refer to a hero, his tasks, and his quests, and the transformations that happen. These narratives, consecrated as escalatal, what is this? I looked this word up earlier, you guys. It means relating to the Christian church. Ecclesiastical, whatever. I'm close, whatever. It means relating to the Christian church. Have more often than not, I wrote it in the margin, have more often than not become the only valid sources to understand the phenomenon of life and death. When these narratives were validated as having a divine origin, all of the beauty of living myth present in the tales and popular sayings, in fairy tales and folklore worldwide, and in all of the creatures from the collective imagination produced by an inexhaustible fountainhead of the archetypal universe was excluded. A symbolic reading of myths and legends brings to light essential structural elements previously buried in obscurity. Myths and legends consist of elements that give form to the process of humanizing archetypal structures, since living structures from the psychological universe are revealed, which are translated into structuring symbols for consciousness. Ecclesiastical. Thank you for typing it like that. Why isn't our language written like that? That's how things should be written. How they freaking sound. But why is everything so complicated? I read that. I read that just fine. Ecclesiastical. Thank you. Good looking out. Could you do that for the rest of the time we read this book? Oh, okay, all right. Good focus. Symbols for consciousness. Thus, the symbolic decoding of this archetypal arsenal will mobilize energy in the direction of new conceptions, like interacting elements that belong to the mystery of existence. I underlined this one. This one's good. Myth in itself will always fascinate, and even more so when the magic of the symbolic reality is discovered within the interwoven threads. However, we need to be open to continual and constant reading of their values and meanings in order to gain access to their meanings and teachings. Only then can the creative process occur. Understanding everything will never be finished reality. The discoverable contents of the widely distributed images keep changing before his eyes in an unceasing permeations as the cultural settings change throughout the world and in the course of history. Leslie agrees, yeah. The Grail legend originates in Leo Tempore. It's close enough. At the same time as the history of the Celtic people, and was mingled at the beginning of the Middle Ages with Christian beliefs. That is why I like this legend so much, because you guys know me, I'm all like, middle path. I'm all about merging things together. And what I like so much about Arthurian legends is that it is that bridge between like the pagan old religion and this like Christian religion, but with this esoteric lens that finds that truth that both of them kind of see but kind of lost, and the quest back to the origin of what every religion is trying to answer, right? The Grail, well, I read that part already. Christian beliefs. Okay. The Lost Grail decreed the emergence of the devastated earth, and as symbolism aligned itself with the question of the faltering Christian faith, which rejected the mother goddess and the earth religions, right? Seeking heroes who could transform this situation. The Celtic people, overpowered by invaders, were looking for a king to defend them, one who would redeem their liberty, and above all, who would preserve their way of life. The elements that comprise the Grail myth derived from a variety of sources, creating a vast hologram of multicultural religious nature, replete with symbolism and pointing towards numerous paths for those to go in search of the sacred chalice. The intention of this book is to talk about the precious chalice and in its various forms, origins, and manifestations, to talk about Arthur and his loyal and faithful knights, the Round Table and the dangerous seat, the great wounded goddess and her devastated earth, the wise old Merlin and his visions of the future, the archetypal themes of quest, liberty, and the desire to return to the Golden Age. During this journey, we will go in search of our own Grail and prepare ourselves to ask the question that Percival was expected to ask but didn't, upon his first encounter with the chalice. Slowly, we will become more familiar with our own difficulties, and we will try to prepare ourselves for the important confrontation brought to us by the vision of divinity. Fear will grow in our souls, germinating like damaged grassland, and overcome by the feeling of danger and cruel doubts that arise from insane questioning. We will ask ourselves whether it is really worth continuing on our journey. However, if this is our wish, and with the purest intentions and open heart, we will find within ourselves the sacred temple that holds the cup of blissfulness. The day when we are able, like Percival, the pure, naive fool, to say to another who is looking for us, "Go where we went and you will know." We will no longer tell stories, for us to become the legend itself. Yes, Celtic astrology is very interesting. Apparently, I am the cauldron. That is the Celtic constellation that I am born under, the cauldron. I love that. So before we dive into chapter 1, I want to really quick talk about this concept of fire, right? This spark of life. If you guys are a Patreon member, I touched on this developing theory in the last video when I was talking about how we have like multiple wombs in astrology that we're like birthed from, right? But then I had the theory kind of develop a little bit more, so I'm going to share my chart here for a second, and I'm going to tell you guys where I've kind of been. This concept of like fire being the element that is reborn and the one that has to spark and return ultimately back home to the water ultimately. I was watching The Fifth Element the other day. I've seen this movie before, but you know, every time you see something, depends on like what level. I can't not look at the screen with this thing on there. I will put it back on when I start reading. See, it's so distracting. What was I saying? Okay, concept of fire, right? So the movie The Fifth Element, I think it's from 98. I don't know when it's from. Late 90s. Have you guys seen it? Has anybody in the chat seen that movie? But it talks, the concept is, you know, the four elements plus the awakened supreme human being the fifth, all of them coming together to, you know, unite against evil ultimately. And in the end, spoiler alert, so if you want to watch this movie and you don't want to know how it ends, maybe skip forward because I'm going to literally tell you the total ending right now. But in the end, this supreme being, which is a woman, it's a divine feminine, right? She does everything she's supposed to do. She goes and gets all the other elements, the little stones that represent earth, wind, air, fire. She goes to the temple that she's supposed to be in, which is indicative of that like womb space, that like vessel that gives everything else its ability to even exist. Yeah, with Bruce Willis. What is the name of that actress? Eddie was asking me and I didn't feel like getting up to Google it. If anybody knows, let me know. I always think she's the chick from Garbage. Like, she looks a lot like the chick from Garbage, but she's definitely not. Okay, anyway. Finds all the stones, right? All the different four elements. She's the supreme being. They're supposed to get her to this special temple that represents, honestly, the womb, this whole vessel, this great mother that's housing everything we're able to do here, right? And she's in the middle and, you know, everything has been placed. All of the different elements have been activated. And, like, the whole little thing hasn't happened yet. And it doesn't happen until she comes into union with the masculine, right? And it's this concept of, like, love igniting and conquering evil, right? Love conquers evil. And it's this union of the masculine and feminine. And, you know, she's been awakened and you know, speaks English now. And at the end, they pan to the fire element stone. And the fire element stone is the one that turns on and ignites first, which is actually the one that he lit with a match. It's the one that the masculine lit because it is him, our masculine. You know, the technical term anima is the female part of the male psyche, and animus, the male part of the female psyche, but I kind of use them interchangeably. Some people do this, you're not supposed to. It's like not technically accurate. but the animus as the male counterpart. But the man, the divine feminine, the divine masculine is the one who lighted the fire element one, right? And at the end, that's the one that turns on first, ignites them ignites all the others, and then them in the middle, and goes up. And so it really speaks to the fire element, that spark of life that we're going to see here is Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, that is birthed from this like watery womb each time, that needs to occur. I had a whole tip, but I'm not sure I made all my points. She plays Joan of Arc in The Messenger. Does she really? Melina Jovic. Oh, yeah. I don't know. Okay, what was I going to do? Oh, share my screen. Okay, I want to show you guys something really quick before we get into this chart. We're going to just do whatever over here. Okay, let me go over here to my notes because it's been in my little notes section. Okay, so these are the notes that I've been taking over the past couple there's not very many here. Over the past couple of days leading up to this video, and this while pondering this concept of like rebirth, and individuation, this process of developing the individual, which happens here. We're born from the womb of Pisces into Aries, the sign of the self. And this first half of the zodiac, this bottom half of the zodiac, is all the development of our inner world, of the individual. And then when we get up into the 7th house, which is the house of others, from then on, we're more being expressed in the outer world and more of the collective consciousness, and how we interact with other people. And this is really where we develop the individual. And then from here on is where we shed the individual. And so when we're thinking about reading this book, that's really what this book is about, that entire process of kind of both, right? And so I wrote here that we have entered the labyrinth, which is ultimately what this is, this like maze, this labyrinth, back home ultimately to the self, to truth within the middle, right? So we've entered the labyrinth once again. A new quest of individuation is upon us. And this one is highlighted by an eclipse later this month on Beltane, and then a blood moon illumination, so a blood moon, full moon, so a lunar eclipse, full moon, in the sign of Scorpio, which is the sign of the mysteries. So that sign is very heavily being illuminated for us as we'll be reading throughout the time we'll be reading this book. I wrote here that the zodiac literally is the knight's quest, Aries being the knight born from the great mother that is Pisces. And the zodiac literally is the knight's quest back home to the great mother. But along the way, he finds himself. And that's pretty much what this story in the Grail legend is all about. The quest to know thyself, and in the process, returning back home to this great, vast cosmic womb, right? So this is the download, or this is the insight that I've had come through that I don't think is talked about, and I find very interesting. So it's this concept of the 3 wombs, okay? This is something that I've realized bit by bit by bit, but has kind of come to light here over the past couple of days, is that the zodiac, we are reborn 3 times, and we are birthed from 3 different wombs. So we have the cosmic womb, that is Pisces, the final sign of the zodiac, that Akashic womb that births the spark of Aries, which is our Mars self, our lower conscious self, that reptilian fight or flight consciousness of the warrior, of that naive fool knight, that Percival ultimately, right? We're then birthed again from the womb of Cancer. While this is the cosmic mother, the cosmic womb, the great mother, this is our more earthly mother, our literal mother's womb. This house and sign literally governs our mother and the womb and our home. in that first little womb that we grow up in, that is our early home environment. And from here, our solar consciousness, our egoic consciousness is birthed from the second womb. And that is Leo, the sun, the second fire sign. And then we have a third womb. So while we are birthed here from the womb of the cosmos, here from the womb of our earthly mother, here in Scorpio, we are birthed in the womb of the mysteries. The Scorpio governs the mysteries, the occult, astrology, all the things we're talking about here. It also governs our shadow and our projections onto others and all of the things we need to integrate, all of those repressed aspects and the mystery and wisdom that they hold. And from this very deep, dark womb of the collective conscious, we are birthed in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter takes 12 years to move around the zodiac, while the sun takes, 1 year to move around the zodiac. The Jupiter spends 1 year in each sign. It's literally the higher fractal of our sun. It represents our higher self, our philosophical self, our expanding self that is birthed from this womb of the mysteries. So we have these 3 different selves that are birthed and ultimately shed as we navigate through the zodiac. Something we're starting right now. We just finished Aries season. Now we're in Taurus. We're really grounding down into some practicality, into some physicality. But what I also want to mention is that what's super interesting is that these 3 fire signs, because they are the 3 signs, they each have their own modality, right? So Aries is the start. It's the start of our consciousness. And so for that reason, it is that base level reptilian, war-minded, aggressive consciousness, right? It's meant to start. It's meant to initiate. It is the cardinal sign. We then have the fixed sign of Leo, which is meant to sustain here in our solar system, give us a sustainability in order to develop this egoic identity, right? Bring our passions into being, love, romance, children, all things that are associated with Leo as well, and really developing that identity, right? And then we have Sagittarius, that evolved fire element, that evolved spark of life, right? And that is the mutable modality. And so it's not initiating, it's not sustaining, it's becoming something else. And that is where these progressive, philosophic views that develop from being born in this realm of the mysteries really start to help project us onto something beyond. And then Aquarius, the final masculine polarity of the zodiac, the air element, then helps us to envision what's next and move forward. So this is something that I've been pondering, and I thought I would share with you guys as we go through this, is this concept of fire being really important. And that spark of flame, that spark of consciousness, that spark of the individual that we must develop. But, then ultimately we shed with that flood where we meld back in with that Akashic womb. Hopefully that made sense. It's still a developing theory, you guys. Okay. I have so much stuff. Milo says that Miko says that the eclipse is her birthday, feeling like a weird and fated day for me. On April 30th, that's my dad's birthday. That's Beltane. Your birthday's on Beltane, which means your birthday sits exactly opposite Samhain, which is Halloween, which is kind of like your half birthday. You're born on one of the 8 solar holidays in the wheel of the year. We're going to be talking about it over on Patreon. That's my dad's birthday. Leslie says, dang it, got to go. We'll be back. LOL, this is so good. I feel and see all that you say. Thank you. We've only read the introduction. I know, I'm on a whole tip. Okay, so let's get into chapter 1, the quest for the Grail. Okay. I figured this would be easier than that giant bong. Last time I tried to smoke a joint and then the smoke kept going in my eye. And I didn't know how to like juggle it and like read, and it was like super complicated. And like the first time I tried to do that like fancy purple bong Eddie got me, and it was like way too big and cumbersome. And so I'm like, I never smoke out of a pipe either, but it feels like the most practical. It's Taurus season. I'm trying to be practical and fancy because they're Venus ruled. Gemini season comes, a bong will probably come back out, or I'll be like smoking blunts and shit. Okay. Anyway, focus. Okay. The quest for the Grail. She says, oh wow, your dad's birthday as well. I need to learn more about Beltane. If you watch the April video that I did here on YouTube, the monthly video, I dove into it a little bit. Over there. We're going to dive deeper over on Patreon. Okay, so the majority of tales that refer to the Grail legend, written in the 12th and 13th centuries, represent different versions and adaptations of what were probably written in the 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries, the majority of which have been lost. The most important versions of the tale, amongst numerous others that exist, were written during the 12th and 13th centuries, including the Percival or Le Conte du Grail by Christian de Troyes. The poet Wolfram von Eckerbach created the most inventive and surprising version of the Grail legend in his work Percival, written between 1210 and 1220. He conjectures that the Grail was something that existed prior to the birth of Christ. The Grail was not a chalice, but a stone sent to Earth by celestial spirits years before. Okay, fun fact. So I'm wearing a couple of things tonight. I always, you guys, everything I do usually has a purpose. Okay, so my shirt is, of course, Monty Python and the Holy Grail as Arthur and the Grail and the bunny, the killer bunny. This is a Moldavite pendant that I made, and a lot of legends connect the stone Moldavite, which is found in the area surrounding Czechoslovakia, from a meteor crash from, I can't remember how long, I used to know how long ago, a really long time ago, that made these special green stones from the crash site, right? And a lot of legends attribute this green stone to being what the Grail was actually made out of, was more attributed to this stone. And here I have my Stonehenge talisman that this is not available on my website, but I make these. I still have a lot of these stones available. This stone is actually from the exact same quarry as the stones at Stonehenge. They're hand harvested, and what's it called when you harvest stones? Quarried. They're hand quarried. Probably not harvested. They're hand quarried and polished and made by this one artisan guy who actually lives on the land that quarry is on. And so I have these stones and I make these little Stonehenge talismans. So these are available on my website. There is a link below if you want one of these. But anyway, this stone is the stone that is attributed to that. I don't know if she's going to get into that. I can't remember if she does, but it's the Moldavite, usually. Sometimes an emerald, but usually they're talking about Moldavite. The Grail was not a chalice, but a stone sent down to Earth by celestial spirits years before. Or sometimes it'll be a black stone. That's also, so while this is not a meteorite, this is a tektite, which is made from the crash of a meteorite and the really, really, really hotness that happens to sand and stuff here on Earth. That's what tektites are. But then there are meteorites, which are usually the black stones that a lot of cultures use in rituals, like in Mecca. Okay. I have a lot of fun facts, guys, so I'll try not to go off on too many tangents, but I can't make any promises. Okay, so before the birth of Christ, the Grail was not a chalice, but a stone sent to earth by celestial spirits years before. The Grail is understood to have been kept by a mysterious brotherhood of knights called Templesian. The text of Percival by von Escherbach was the source of inspiration for Wagner when he wrote his opera Percival. Finally, there was you guys, my poor ancestors are going to be so embarrassed. They're like rolling over in their grave as I try to say these words. Tasha says, "Oh my God, I found one of my Moldavites that I lost the other day." Of course you did. Moldavite. My dad bought me this one in Oregon because I was visiting him, and I really, really, really wanted one of these for a long time, but they're so expensive. And this was like before I had started my business or anything like that, and I was like trying to, get my life together. And there was no way I could come home and be like, "Babe, look I spent a ridiculous amount of money on a rock this big." So there was no way. My dad was like, "I'll buy it for you." My dad got it for me at like this special gem museum in Oregon. Okay, so I was about to say La Morte de Author, published by Sir Thomas Malory. The date's unknown, though. This is the only translation to English of a book previously written in primitive French by an unknown author whose original title was Quest de Saint Grail. Both Percival by Christian de Choice, 1992, and Parsival by von Escherbach present the hero theme of searching for the precious vase, considered fundamental in Celtic culture. They also have a lot of the same, like a lot of Celtic legends and stuff where it's a cauldron. It's a cauldron, not a chalice or a vase. I should have looked this one up. Le Morte de Author by Malory brings together the version of the Grail theme in which the sacred chalice holds the blood and sweat of Christ, which was taken in times gone by to Europe by Joseph de Arithemia, or his successor. According to the version written by von Escherbach, the chalice originated from a stone of light, which came from the heavens, brought by impartial angels. This theme was once again taken up by Dante in the Divine Comedy. Okay, so that is always a key symbolic connection to almost all of the Grail legends, is that it is that like middle path, and that there's usually some sort of like war in heaven between like God and like the angels against God, and then there were like these partial neutral angels who were like, yo, you are also not right, and like you are also not right, and so I'm like this partial neutral angel, and they're always the ones who are said to like bring down the Grail, and I think that's a key symbolic aspect to the legend. Okay. In the Britannic religion, there is an immense complex, created and forged from the ancient culture, in which one finds influence of Celtic, Greek, and classic Roman cultures, as well as the original influences from the regions now known as Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Germany. Over the centuries, the European consciousness developed as a result of the interaction between these four different traditions. Molded into the all, these influences will comprise a unique way of thinking and being. It will become the emergent European consciousness, with the basic characteristics being respect for the individual, for who he is, and the way he makes his world, and the path he chooses. That's a quote from Joseph Campbell. Miko says, I don't know how to say that, Sintamani is also supposedly connected to the Holy Grail. Real Sintamani is very hard to find or very expensive. They come as spheres and look like crystal balls held in the Christian icons. Okay, I know what you're talking about. And they are different colors of rainbow, and light shines through them, kind of like Moldavite. there were American Indians in Colorado that held them in high esteem, but I believe they come from somewhere around India. Oh, that's so interesting. Now I want one of those. I'm going to have to look into that. That sounds very cool. Okay, where was I? The Campbell quote. Okay, so the Grail legend returns to its expressive symbolic structuring of the personal and collective consciousness, prioritizing the need for each individual to go in search of himself. This search, when undertaken, should be a personal search, such that each individual discovers his or her own path. Joseph Campbell tells us that Mallory translated Le Morte the author from French to English. He eliminated parts that Campbell himself considered to be extremely important. In the original French version, there is a part that refers to the existence of the knights during a period when Arthur, an important mythical king, ruled Britain. During these times, whilst the banquets were served at Camelot, there was a ritual whereby the knights told of their adventures they encountered whilst performing their work. On one specific day, the knights were greeted, and the adventurer told was the appearance. On one specific day, the knights were seated, and the adventure told was the appearance of the Grail, carried by angelic messengers and covered by a veil as it hovers above the company. And I think that veil is very significant. Not only does it speak to that like veil of the mysteries, but that like veil of the feminine as well. And that like veil that sits between you and the ability to know yourself. Again, that was a quote by Campbell. When the ray of light appeared in the courtyard of Camelot, where the knights were seated at the round table, priestesses carried a luminous chalice as if it were a hologram. Everyone watched in awe. They realized that it was the Grail that had mysteriously disappeared years ago. One of Arthur's knights, his beloved nephew, Sir Gawain, proposed that they all undertake a task, that they would all go in search of the sacred Grail, and upon finding it, each to behold it unveiled, to which all of them agreed. Oh, I'm saying something correctly? Yes. The name of that crystal? One for me. Chalk up one for me. I've butchered so many of these words, I'm fully aware. But, like, you guys, I don't know how to say these things out loud. I just read them in books. I mean, I've heard things in documentaries. I can't remember all that. These French words, I know I am really butchering these really bad. I know that for sure. Okay. Where was I at? And they all agreed. Okay. To behold it unveiled means, symbolically, appreciate it in its fullness. And this required a pure soul. In order to achieve this, the knights had to go through initiation rites that were considered essential to transform their conscious dynamics and change the structure of their personalities, moving from those three different sparks of light, right? Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, the shifting of our identity from our Mars mind to our solar mind to our higher Jupiterian philosophical mind. These shifts of personality that occur from the womb of these watery realms that sit before them, right? And then these fiery versions of our consciousness sit opposite air signs that feed that fire. The air, which is our mental element, has to feed the fire or it can't exist, right? And those are our masculine polarities that are birthed from the womb beforehand. Okay. I'm not sure what sparked that, but whatever. I'm just going to roll with it. Okay, so according to Campbell, the following text refers to the words that had not been translated by Mallory, who is very controversial in his own right. I can't remember if she gets into it. Maybe we'll get into him. I don't know. Maybe we'll dive into some of these people afterwards. Okay. So they agreed that all would go on this quest, but they thought that it would be a disgrace to go forth in a group. So each entered the forest at a point that he himself had chosen, where it was darkest and there was no path. Campbell quotes these words and gives them great meaning, since they explicitly state the quest is individual and solitary, as is every individuation process. When the knights went off in search of their adventures, they rarely went alone. They almost always traveled in pairs. Each knight was accompanied by one or more knights. The knights were responsible for patrolling the forests, saving maidens from dragons, helping the needy, and defending the weak. On the day specified to go in search of the Grail, they realized intuitively that it would be inappropriate to leave as a group, and they agreed that each one would choose their own path. The search for the Grail is an individual process. The search for the Grail as an individual process begins at a certain point in the forest, considered to be the darkest point, where there is no path. That speaks very much to Pisces, right? The darkest point where there is no path, because literally every path is before you, and then you're sparked as an individual in Aries, and you start this quest of individuation. I'm going to start that paragraph over. The search for the Grail as an individual process begins at a certain point in the forest, considered to be the darkest point, where there is no path, or perhaps from a bridge where the traveler makes his own way. Despite being individual, the search follows unknown procedures. There is no way of knowing which path to follow. Above all, what is most important is the actual quest and facing the difficulties that arise, or having to create an innovative solutions never before considered, and finally surrender oneself to God, which in some form and in some place will be waiting for whoever takes on the challenge. The quest for the Grail is equivalent to a call from the unconscious of the Western man to go in search of his origins. It offers the opportunity to recover one's cultural roots, lost as a result of being masked and adulterated by Greek Aristotelian logic and by Christian thought, impoverished by patriarchal defenses which undermine the philosophical formulations and theological foundations of the recent own way of being European. What a mouthful, Jesus. To recover one's own roots always means acquiring the skills to symbolically find one's Grail. Chapter 2, The Legend. Okay, I'm going to take ahead of somebody and then we'll get into the legend. She's good. I like her. I like the way she thinks. I like the way she writes. I like the stuff she says. I'm vibing with her. I'm going to get her other 2 books. All right. Ow. Okay. The legend tells of an enchanted princess who sleeps, who can only be awakened by an infant who had come from beyond the walled road. That's from Eros and Psyche. It's a quote that she started this chapter off with. The Grail. A precious object emerges from the descriptions in the legends in the form of a table, a stone, silver, cup, or chalice. Some versions speak of the Grail that, given a unique quality of being a wonderful recipient, is able to change form. And this phenomenon of transformation had occurred over the centuries. Since it is a precious object, the Grail was seen as the source of wisdom and eternal illumination, the discovery of the greatest essence that exists in all humans. It has also been seen as the cup of food or abundance and is waiting for all those who search for it. She says she's going to download the audiobook if there is one. Yeah, this book is I really like this book a lot. It's very rare that I read something like all the way through, and I usually, you guys, like I read and I write in all my books, but usually what I'm writing is how I disagree with what this person just said, and I go off on this whole tip in the margins. That was not the case with this. I did have a lot of astrological connections come through to the stuff that she was saying that I have written here in these margins. I never wear makeup, so whenever I wear makeup for these videos so that I have a face, my face is always so itchy. Okay. The legend, permeated with magical themes, also tells of the difficulty of finding the castle temple, demanding to be freed from its spell, to enable the sacred chalice to be recovered. The tales of the legend appear explicitly in the European literary process, as already mentioned. Only at the end of the 12th century during the Middle Ages, the myth emerges through an abundance of descriptive texts concerning the same enigma. Several centuries elapsed between the appearance of these first documents and the literary production on the Grail. The appearance and disappearance of the legend has resulted in some writers seeing a correlation between the search for the Grail, the search for the feminine, and the reintegration of the feminine related to the Christian Catholic faith. Yeah, that book we read earlier, I read that book a while back, and I wanted to just read that one page that sparked that whole what are the lessons of my faith, why am I so obsessed with certain things, even the only video game I ever played was Zelda. Zelda is all about the same stuff. Zelda is an Arthurian legend pretty much, and it's about literally this exact same archetype. Harry Potter, everything I've always been obsessed with. Before I knew there was mystical, esoteric undertones, those were helping me build this basics for the lessons of my faith. But anyway, that other book is full of me not agreeing with her, or picking out certain words and having major issues with the way certain things are worded, and having to give my 2 cents on that. So yeah. Where was I? Who knows? The legend concerning the same enigma. Okay. Christian Catholic faith. Okay. Whose medieval theology until then had been based on the power of the masculine. During this historic moment, the symbolic emergence of the feminine, claiming redemption, expressed in literature, appeared synchronistically with the proposals to renew the Catholic Church. There was concern about spreading the Christian religion throughout Europe, either through encouraging the cult of the Virgin Mary, the practice of the Rosary, or the construction of cathedrals. The Gothic temples started to be erected. The majority being of giant proportions, which required great sums of money and a great deal of effort to be invested. These cathedrals were constructed mainly in places where, in times gone by, the pagan cult had been dedicated to the great goddess of Celtic origin. However, even though the church was concerned with officially introducing the cult of the Rosary, which was evident in a sequence of religious speeches invoking the Virgin Mary and her beloved Son, The institution of the whole would continue to remain submissive to God the Father. At this time, the cult of the Virgin Mary, which began in Britain, spread throughout Italy, Greece, and Bulgaria, and even reached as far as Asia Minor. It's as far as like Africa. It's all over. Okay. Yes, power spots. They for sure. That's what they were trying to harness were the ley line points and these spiritual centers. 100%. The Kingdom of Britain became the stage for the Grail legends and the Knights of the Round Table. In its mixture of heroic themes, quests, and appeals from the wounded feminine, we find expressions of the movement of people that had been subjugated to the power of other nations and their religious beliefs destroyed. I just spelled tea everywhere. Okay. The legend, through its Christian expression, had in the sacred chalice the container of the blood and sweat of Christ. Although this version was not accepted by the Catholic Church, other versions speak of the Grail as the receptacle used by Christ when he introduced the Mass during the Last Supper. Robert de Boron, that's probably super wrong, Robert de Boron tells us that the Grail was taken to Britain by Joseph of Arimathea. I think I'm saying that right. When Joseph was in prison, he received instructions from Jesus about the value of the chalice and the need to spread the ritual of the Mass. Symbolically, the Grail has become the representation of the empty tomb of Christ, with the paten being the equivalent of the tombstone. The empty grave reminds us of the absence of a loved one whose death took place to redeem all of humanity. On the other hand, the institution of Mass expresses the consummation of the presence of the divine through the ritualizing and expression of the emergence of the phenomenon of Christ as it occurred during the Last Supper. Mass is symbolically the ritual celebration of the death and rebirth of Christ, where bread and wine are transformed into the body and blood of Christ the Savior. When swallowed by the initiate, they become food, inspiration, hope, and the agents for transforming the soul. The Latin phrase that ends the ritual can be taken to mean, "Go, your mission has begun." That is, when the ritual is ended for the initiates, the mission to spread Christianity and its cults throughout the world has begun. When Christ instructed Joseph, he would have impressed upon him the need to spread the Christian beliefs through the ritual Mass. That is, the mystery of his death and rebirth. Joseph kept the chalice during his 30 long years in prison. When he was freed, it was said that he, together with his followers, took the chalice from Palestine to Europe. Then they arrived in Britain. This chalice was placed in a temple to be worshipped, but, according to the legend, after some time it disappeared for reasons unknown. The Grail legend tells us about men's search for a precious object. Since it had been lost, it should be searched for untiringly. Oh my gosh, you guys are stoned, and there's like certain words I'm not going to be able to say out loud. The Grail can be recovered if the desire by those who wish to search for it can be blessed. Men who join the search have to be pure of heart. If they find the chalice, they will be faced with extraordinary sights, with terrifying subjective experiences, and will experience strange feelings. And if they can bear all of this, they may, through a unique experience, come in contact with the divine. The legends of the Grail invaded Europe at the time that the church was concerned with announcing the importance of having faith in what cannot be seen. Within this constance of having faith in within this context, the search for the Grail, which is understood as having an archetypal character, tells of the great human need to come into physical contact and see the symbol. The quest for the sacred chalice represents the search for a closer and more concrete God that was in contact with men, could be touched, and was accessible to measurable reality. The Grail themes, Arthur and his knights, and the searches and appeals of people dominated by their invaders, according to some, began to emerge in the collective folklore of Britain during the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries AD, and were portrayed in the literature from that period. The legends tell us of a Roman leader or a war leader coming to defend the Britons through the region of Pyrenees. We can assume that based on the actual personality through the legends around the myth of Arthur, which was more ancient. With the help of this duke, part of the invasion of the Angles and the Saxons was repulsed. And after driving out the invaders, the duke established his kingdom among the Britons. Bretons. It's spelled Bretons. I am not sure what that is, but I think it might be like pre-Britain. I don't know. Let's look it up, what this spelling actually means. I think it's just a different spelling. Native to Brittany, the Celtic language of Brittany. So yeah, I think it's just like a pre-Britain way of saying Britain. Okay. The region governed by the Duke developed significantly and improved its agricultural production, giving rise to the legend of a happy and peaceful people. The Arthurian legends, particularly when Arthur was ruling Camelot, that period where he was in rule, is considered to be kind of like a golden age legend. It's kind of like an echo of that Atlantean golden age legend, but from a time period that people could grasp more easily. But it's that same sort of archetypal story of a prosperous age after a period of not prosperous age, like a rescuing period of prosperous age, right? The once and future king. So hopefully we get there again. We'll see. Okay, so peaceful people, right? Despite having recovered all of Britain, Arthur started a series of attacks against the Roman oppressors, threatening even to invade Rome, the capital of the empire. The Britons were later beaten by the Angles, but in Cornwall, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, the Celtic Britons survived. There, the legend developed and became more structured, and a significant part of the traditions of the Celtic people were preserved. However, during the centuries of Roman dominance, the Celts became Christianized. During Arthur's reign, the knightly endeavor was shaped by an idea of the sacred chalice, the Holy Grail, container of the blood and sweat of Christ, and claiming redemption. To tell of this mythical king, who one day congregated his knights to undertake the great task of maintaining a great kingdom, we first need to tell a few stories of the Celtic people. Great Celtic Welsh words. I'm so bad at this language. And it's the culture I'm most strongly connected to too. Okay. If that makes them feel any better, I'm not great at English either, guys. not that great at that either. Okay, so this is chapter 3, the history. Yeah, from like Britannia, Old Britain. Andrea says, I gotta go to bed, but I'm gonna come back and listen when I'm working on art homework. That's perfect for this. Miko says, modern Western Christianity again eradicated the feminine and any prominence of Mary the Mother, the Rosary, Mary Magdalene, which is a good point. She hasn't mentioned that yet, but I think she does. So the West again tried to constantly get rid of any feminine prominence, and that's what I like so much about this Legends, is it's that same Western mind, which I'm very rooted in. I don't know if you guys, my Patreon members know this, but like, I was not mystical at all. Even though like I've been obsessed with these fantasy stories since I was a very, 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 very small child, I still was very scientific minded. Like I majored in psychology. I thought everything was based in the brain. I didn't really believe in higher powers and things like that. I could get down with like the universe, you know what I mean? But I wasn't positive that after we died there was anything. I thought it was just black. You just go back to the void. I was like a atheist, existentialist, nihilist nightmare in my early 20s. And I was very rooted in the like masculine mind and like data and science and studies and things like that. And it wasn't until I had some like actual physical spiritual experiences that I was like, oh yeah, there's way more here that I was very unaware of. But I was very rooted in this like Western masculine mind. And my chart is a very masculine in nature. I have lots of air and lots of fire and not much water. And the water that I do have is deep and Scorpio, and it's in my mind. It's in my third house of the like analytical mind, and I have Mercury conjunct Pluto there, so I have this deeply penetrating analytical mind, but it's still mental. And so the legends that I was first attracted to were hero legends. There were these masculine legends that needed to go and like rescue this feminine. I was more aligned with my masculine aspect and had to even find this deeply intuitive feminine wisdom within that I, didn't really have access to. So these were my jam. These were my myths. I don't know how I started talking about that. What was this about? I have no idea. How did we get here? What did we say? Oh, the feminine thing. Yeah, why I like it so much. These legends are the lessons of the faith of the masculine mind, that like deeply patriarchal Western mind that has developed. That's why these are so connected to that like European consciousness, right? That has now reached its extent out there into the light spectrum, right? And now it needs to make a U-turn and come back. And this is like the roadmap to the U-turn back. And as we continue to go through here, there's a lot of lessons that can be learned, especially from a lot of these knights' failures. And, a lot of these things, they haven't been obtained yet. Humanity is going through this right now. Okay, let's see what people are saying here. She says, same. The Latin Britannia was the name previously applied to the British Isles, Great Britain, and the Roman province of Britain during the Roman Empire. Cool. She says, same. I grew up in a Christian home, but was very scientific about things. Yet I loved sci-fi and fantasy. Me too. Sci-fi and fantasy. I loved it so much. And now I'm like, oh, duh. Makes so much sense. But you guys probably can tell I overthink. I'm like a big thinker. Tasha says, dude, same Z's. I was the worst. I was so bad, you guys. I was so bad. I was like yeah. She said, I jokingly tell my friends, I'm all love and light, laying on a bed of casual nihilism. Yeah, for sure. Same. Okay, so the history. I'm not sure how I went off on a tip, but hopefully it was at least an entertaining one. These glasses are killing me, you guys. I'm going to try to read without them. I legitimately need them to read this book, but the glare of the computer is so distracting that it's just not working for me. So we're gonna go and see how this is. Okay. Everything transitory is only approximation. Everything transitory is only approximation. I have literally no idea what that means. It's by some French dude. We're gonna move on. Okay, that was the quote she opened this chapter with. I don't know. It's 10:41. I have no idea what you're saying, lady. Okay. During the 1st century AD, the Celtic people inhabited Gaul, Great Britain, and Ireland. They were united through a common religion, the culture they had developed over the centuries, and through their own literature, which, although not written, I was going to say, they didn't have literature, it's not written down, they didn't write their stuff down, okay. Through their own literature, although not written, was sang and recited by poets as means of transmitting knowledge, both sacred and profane. The Roman Empire started its invasion of Northern Europe around 50 BC. The Gaul was invaded and occupied by Julius Caesar in 52 BC. And the Romans soon imposed their own systems there. Most of what we know from that whole area, we know because of the Romans. Like anything we know about like the Druids or even the Celts is funneled through the Romans. So they don't always have the best, like highest view of these people. Great Britain was conquered soon after. However, the Romans were unable to subdue Scotland. You can never subdue Scotland. They were unable to subdue Scotland, which was dominated by the Picts, or Wales, Ireland, or Cornwall, where the Celts had remained undefeated. The Picts were crazy. Those guys were so badass. They were like literally wild men who just like lived in the woods and like had tattoos and face painting. They usually painted themselves with like blue paintings. If you see like old movie depictions from this time and you see the little like Celtic tribes, actually technically the Picts, with the blue paint, that's them. The Roman Empire lasted 5 long centuries. Around 330 BC, Rome had become, in part, Christianized. And the Emperor Constantine, driven by political interest, converted to Christianity and was appointed the head of the Catholic Church. He then transformed the Roman Empire into a Christian empire. He was succeeded by Theodosius, who imposed only the Christian religion in his empire, suppressing all other cults. As a result, this new attitude, a significant part of the European intellectuals left the region and took refuge in Asia Minor, contributing towards the important development of Persian and Indian arts and the collapse of European art, the development of Persian and Indian art and the collapse of European art. By the middle of the 4th century AD, the Roman Empire had completely Christianized. Around the same time, for economic reasons, the Rome started to slowly withdraw its troops. Until then, the Roman Empire had continued to expand and hold on to its conquests until its domination extended from Britain to Asia Minor. In the middle of the 5th century, Rome started to systematically withdraw its soldiers from its territories. The fortifications and frontier defenses had consumed great sums of money, and funds were no longer available to maintain these troops as guardians of these distant lands. A great number of soldiers responsible for security were mercenaries, and public funds were rapidly coming to an end. The mercenary troops and Romans were continually moved from their post. this resulted in the Roman legions having contact with a variety of different cultures. The soldiers, during their continual relocations between the numerous Roman fortifications, were influenced by all of the socio-cultural aspects of the people they dominated. A lot of these influences, the majority from Asia Minor, were assimilated within the soldiers' psyches. When they were moved from one frontier to another, they became the messengers of profound cultural and religious changes. The withdrawal of Roman troops from Europe left the Celtic territory open to invasion by the Danish, Anglo-Saxons, from the Danish and the Anglo-Saxons. The Celts withdrew and started to occupy the land today known as Ireland, Scotland, England, and the northwest of France, which at the time was known as Brittany. When the Romans abandoned Britain, they left behind a people impregnated with a variety of mythical and cultural experiences, realities, and references. Over the centuries, these realities took their own form and developed a way of viewing and expressing the world that had become explicit in European literature with the emergence of the Arthurian stories. The common theme throughout this literature was the loss of something precious. Given this fact, certain questions can be asked. Is it possible one day to recover what was lost? If what is lost is recovered, will it return in its entirety to the world? If what was lost is recovered, will it bring transformation for the collective? The answers received provoke new questions. Will it recover? Will it be the recovery of the Celtic religion? Will it be the return of the great goddess, excluded from the pantheon of worshipped gods? Will it be something completely new, a product of secular transformation, resulting from the great cultural, this freaking alchemical word, the process of uniting it all together, the one that starts with a C. Let's look it up. We're going to look up how to pronounce this word. I'll be right back to read what you guys are saying. Evie, where are you? I know you know how to say this word. You always say it so beautifully in all your word things. By the way, while you guys are here on YouTube, follow my friend's channel, Jupiter Heals. She is very well versed in adept psychology and mythology, and archetypal analysis, and her videos are phenomenal. I'm a big fan of her work. She talks a lot. She brings in the alchemical stages a lot into her work. Okay, how do we say this?
Coagulation.
Coagulation? But, because it changed it to the English version. This is in Latin. Yeah, I wanted you to say it in Latin, dude. Why does it keep going to English? Whatever. Coagulato, I think is how you say it in Latin now that I've heard them say it in English. Coagulato. It's that alchemical stage when everything merges together, right? So will it be something completely new, a production of secular transformation resulting in the great cultural coagulato process? The coagulation process, which doesn't sound nearly as nice as the Latin version. The great goddess was no longer venerated, and her place had been taken by the imposition of the Christian Catholic religion, with its increasingly radical use of abusive power. Over the centuries, the church deviated more and more from its principles and values, giving rise to a growing immorality, culminating in the Inquisition. The priests were instructed by the Pope to sell indulgences, and favored believers were informed that their place would be guaranteed in heaven, provided money was given to the church. Put another way, only permanent things are what they purport to be. So basically what it sounds like she is explaining in this chapter: everything perishes, people, places, suns, moon, the universe itself. Depending on your philosophical religious system, the only true permanent thing is the Godhead, pure consciousness. But it is even like pre-consciousness, right? Even before, because the Godhead, pure consciousness, is the light that is temporary. It eventually will give way to that like void again, right? All of our stars are going to burn out one day. Eventually space is just going to be a big old void full of black holes that will be here for quite a while, and those will burn out too. But on the other side of those black holes, I believe, is a white hole and the start of a whole new cycle, a whole new birth of creation into something else, right? Okay. When St. Augustine was consulted on the question, talking about the quote metaphor. Yeah. Oh, the one that I read in the beginning that I had no idea what she was saying? Yeah, that is probably what that means. Good looking out. Okay. When St. Augustine was consulted on the question of whether the sacraments continued to be sacred or whether they became invalid when ministered by priests leading the corrupt lives current at the time, he replied that the sacraments were immune to human transgressions and retained their divine essence, irrespective of who ministered them. The way this great thinker, philosopher, and saint was able to speak about the transcendence and the incorruptibility of the divine principle remains fascinating. Yeah, I got you. Good looking out. Okay. However, it seems apparent that when St. Augustine made this declaration, he was caught in the defensive dissociation of the patriarchal dynamic of his time, and he separated essence from existence. His assertive statement that the sacred principle was incorruptible, since the sacrament is God in us and remains unblemished, even when ministered by priests who are so profoundly dissociated from their ethical values, could corroborate the storliage? I literally have never seen this word in my life. Or deceit. I assume it means something along the lines of deceit. Excusing the corruption and indiscriminate attitudes which the clergy upheld. The 12th and 13th centuries, the time of the Arthurian cycle, coincided with the time of the Crusades. The church preached that the sacred places of Palestine had to be conquered by the Christians, and with the Crusades, the church would be able to recover the Christian relics. The search for the Holy Scepter, the recovery of religious relics such as the Holy Shroud, and the remains of the cross on which Christ had died, along with the expulsion of pagan people from holy places, became the tasks of the Crusaders. A large number of European rulers joined the Crusades. Their places were taken by intruders or women who, assuming a variety of functions, included that of ruler, emerged on the European socio-political scene, marking a historic change. Eleanor of Antiquite, where? Let's find out where this chick's from. I'm not even really close. No, but it's not. French?
Aquitaine.
Aquitaine. Is that in France? France. It's a region in France. Aquitaine in France. Okay. Eleanor of Aquitaine, her daughter Comtesse of Champagne, or Marie of France, and later her granddaughter of Castile, attracted the most attention. Let me go back over here so you can see you guys. Eleanor of Aquitaine was born in the south of France and was heiress to all of the European traditions. As the granddaughter of William the whatever I and X is, who knows their Roman numerals? I don't. If I was just reading this on my own, I would never look this up, but we're going to look this up. The 9th. Daughter to William the 9th, the first known troubadour, she accepted the Arthurian legend. Eleanor was married to Louis the Seventh. I know that one. Louis the Seventh of France, and had 2 daughters with him. After participating in one of the Crusades with her husband, she tired of his masculine adventure, and on returning to France in 1152, she asked for her marriage to be annulled. She subsequently married Henry Plantagenet, whatever, Count of who knows what, and the Duke of Normandy, and grandson of Henry I of England. With the death of the king in 1154, the Count of Anjou assumed the throne, and Henry II of England, as well as the queen consort Eleanor, was also mother to Richard the Lionheart and John of England. So, fun fact, Richard the Lionheart and King John of England, those are the kings from the Robin Hood legend. King John, in particularly being like the evil king, they're brothers though, so they're from the same bloodline. But fun fact, all of our U.S. presidents and a large faction of like European royalty are all direct descendants of King John, the like evil king from Robin Hood. Like, you know, the Disney version? It's like the lion guy. You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, fun fact. Okay. Upon the death of his father, Henry II, in 1189, Richard the Lionheart was crowned the King of England and quickly left for the Third Crusade. Oh, they're literally about to tell you what I just told you. Well, except for the president part. I'm not going to tell you that. Okay, so upon the death of his father, Henry II, in 1189, Richard the Lionheart was crowned the King of England and quickly left for the Third Crusade. He left the throne in the hands of his mother, Eleanor, who was consequently threatened by her unscrupulous son, John, Richard's brother. It was during this period that the Robin Hood legend started to appear. Richard died in 1199 without leaving an heir. John was crowned king. In the legend, John steals the throne from him while he was away in the Crusades. Sometimes he dies in the Crusades, sometimes he comes back, but usually he's goes out of his way to steal the throne, with the sheriff of Nottingham helping him out through good old corruption. She says, yep, I honestly never liked that movie. Made me feel weird as a kid. I really like Robin Hood legends, especially the rebel aspect of living in the woods and stealing from the rich to give to the poor. I really liked Robin Hood a lot growing up. That was one of the ones I like a lot. Okay. As Queen of England, Eleanor encouraged the country's cultural development, sponsoring soirees, tutoring writers, and supporting... Okay, what is this word? They've said this a bunch of times. This does not say troubadours. Does it? Is that what that says? We're going to find out what this says. Troubadours. I think that is. Troubadours. It's a French medieval lyric poet composing in singing in the 11th, 13th centuries, especially on the theme of courtly love. Okay, that makes sense. Troubadours, that's what I thought that said. Okay. Minstrels, poets, and lyricists. Whenever I see the word minstrels, I cannot not think of Fraggle Rock. I don't know how old you guys are. I never watched Fraggle Rock as a kid because I didn't have cable and it was on HBO. But Eddie did. And we have them all on DVD. So our kids have seen them like a bunch of times. And it's a Jim Henson show on HBO with like puppets, little Fraggles. And they have these little minstrels. And they always like play their little instruments. And they have all these like deeply insightful spiritual things to say in song, right? Okay, so minstrels, poets, and lyricists. Encouraging them to sing and spread their art, like a good divine feminine leader will do. They talked of Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, and the search for the Holy Grail. Along with the Arthurian tales, they also spoke of the need to search for the most authentic love, known and celebrated as courtly love. So, I'm sure she's going to go into this, but I'm just going to touch on this right here. Like, before this time, and, like, all of these, like, romanticists writing poems and stuff, and these legends, like, prior to that, people were, like, married for power or, like, they were sold off by their family. Like, marriage was, like, practical. It was, like, how can this help my public standing the most, whether it be the father's or ideally the woman's trying to move up the ladder somehow. Is usually they're like trying to strategically make these unions, and like love wasn't what it was based on, right? It was around this time that these romantic poets and things were being written, and the shift went from like, how can I unite for power and money and status, as opposed to how can I unite in a search for authentic courtship and love and union, right? During this time, people were still definitely arranged marriage. People still are today, have arranged marriages. Oh my god. I could never. Okay. I'm a Libra, you guys. So there's no way. I would just run away. Okay. Anyway. Courtly love. Their ballads spread throughout Europe, introducing love in his romances as an empowering human force, equating this with the Celtic idea of love destiny. The songs of the Arthurian cycle began to be associated with the emergence of what was considered authentic love. The troubadours sang of courtly love as a way of praising the female. She's like, yes, you're saying it right. You guys, I am so used to pronouncing everything wrong that I just assume it now. My Chiron is in Gemini, okay? It's a wound I'm working through. The assumption that I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so figure. The troubadours sang of courtly love as a way of praising the female figure, demonstrating their ability to describe women in terms of their sensuality, passionate love, and pagan nature. Courtly love was similar to Celtic love, which was also described as a phenomenon of nature, as a fatality, but not connected to the notion of death. According to Barros, courtly love glorified women, transforming her into a supreme being. Back to the fifth element, to a supreme being. Courtly love glorified woman, transforming her into a supreme being, but made man dependent on her, an obedient servant, humiliated, often at the mercy of the lady's wishes and whims. Was the church concerned about the spreading of this type of literature? Was this the same church concerned with the behavior reigning throughout the courts? The answer seems to be yes, since the church assumed responsibility for integrating the sacred and the profane, incorporating the most essential expressions in order to accompany social and cultural changes. The Christian religion now proposed a certain eclectic marriage with the pagan religions, in which wisely, life in its fullest splendor was exalted. The songs of courtly love invaded Europe. They were written in vulgar tongues, which, as French and English, thus abandoning Latin and recited in the first person. Okay, chapter 4, courtly love. Okay, hold on. I'm going to pour some more tea because my tea is empty. I'm going to smoke a little bit of weed. And, yeah, focus. Okay, what time is it? 11 o'clock. Okay, we'll read a little bit more. Maybe we won't get to chapter 9. I did talk a lot in the beginning. But I want to kind of try to talk as I go. The last book was harder to do that with because it was a story. And I didn't want to interrupt the flow too much to give you my tidbits and stuff. This is more easier to do that with. And so it was I wanted to read. But then I waited too long and now I don't know what I want to say about it. I had all these insights come after I was done reading. I was like, oh, we're going to do another video. I'm going to talk about all this stuff. I don't remember, you guys. I don't remember. Yeah, we're not going to go off on that tip right now. Okay. Courtly love. Courtly love in poems and love songs was meaningful love, painful love, the love of man for woman. This type of love occurred when the person in love was not married to his love object and almost always referred to an adulterous love. In the majority of cases, marriage was a contract without love, and the relationship that was established was more of an economic agreement. The joining together of land, assets, and possessions established through family agreements, marriage was and had to be a good business agreement. Campbell refers to the poet Gerald de Boulogne. Wow, that was so bad. He's French, you guys. I have no idea how to say that. Who translated the essence of courtly love in a very happy form. The poet observed, the eyes are the scouts of the heart. And when the eyes have found such an image, if the heart is a gentle heart, then love is born. Thus, young men had to find an image. This image had to be reflected in the eyes of another, which then resulted in an encounter with a courtly heart. After that, love would blossom, and passion would flourish. Numerous stories exist, often of a cosmic nature, that tell of men falling in love with married women. When a man fell in love with a woman, he felt a great need to be recognized by this lady who he courted. And when he was recognized by the lady, the lover was given authority to continue with his intentions. If the lady accepted the lover's courting, this meant that she too was lovingly involved with him. To do so, she had to say mercy, that is to say, I accept you or I receive you. If, despite all the courtly attempts by the lover, the lady does not design to give a reply or even a glance, she is considered to be savage, and the troubadours should address her as such. On the one hand, when the lady accepted the affections of a lover, she was responsible for giving this knight a task. For example, he may be required to guard a bridge, since these were strategic locations, and this task was considered to be of great importance. Consequently, there seemed to be a certain excess of gentlemen responsible for guarding bridges. On the other hand, if the lover was versed in the literary arts, he was required to write poems, and perhaps because of this, the literary production of verse increased. Campbell I also love that she quotes Joseph Campbell so much. You guys know I really, really, really like that. I like that guy so much. Okay, so Campbell tells us the story of a gentleman in love with a lady who, when he declares his feelings to her, received the following reply: "No, I have a lover." The gentleman was extremely distressed with the reply, but did not give up. "I am in love with you. What do I do now?" The lady in question found a solution, telling the gentleman, "I have a lover, but if I cast him off or lose him, then you are next in line." Jeez, lady. After some time, the lady's husband died. After the formal bereavement period, she married her lover, and our gentleman no longer received the loving glances from his loved one. Consequently, he insisted on his rights. He was not the first on the Was he not the first on the list? When the lady was questioned on this matter, she replied that she had married her lover because she loves him. The gentleman was indignant and bellowed at his lover. "The man with whom you favored with marriage is not to be loved. Love is reserved for lovers, and I demand my place." There is another story, also told by Campbell, of a certain troubadour who was in love with a lady whose name was similar to the word wolf. So the gentleman clothed himself in wolf skin and attacked a flock of sheep. However, during the attack, he was pounced on and by the sheepdogs guarding the sheep. Afterwards, he sent a message to his loved one, telling her he had risked his life to attract her attention. He had been badly injured and asked to be taken to her castle, where he could be healed. The outcome of the story is that the gentleman was taken in by the lady and looked after her and by her and her husband. These are the stories of courtly love. To live it and understand it, one had to have very intense feelings, which caused a great deal of suffering, since it was only through suffering that the soul could be transformed and the meaning of life could be found. While the stories of courtly love told of ideal characters driven exclusively by devoted feelings towards their loved one in the tales from the Arthurian cycle, we find heroic characters who are idealized and all of noble origin. Arthur's knights were driven by pure feelings, and their highest goal was to fulfill their duty. In the old legends, they are all of noble origins, but there's a lot of more modern depictions of Arthurian legends that have many of the knights come from peasant families, but through good deeds and helping Arthur do certain quests or assist him in certain ways, they were then brought into knighthood, but that they came more from peasant families. But yeah, I do think the original legends are all of noble blood. They love their noble blood. Okay, where am I at? Heroic knights, all of noble origin. Arthur's knights were driven by pure feelings, and their highest goal was to fulfill their duty, which was the unwavering protection of the weakest and most vulnerable in their struggles against monstrous captors of damsels and in patrolling the forests. These tasks, considered to be of heroic nature, revealed their archetypal nature. The Arthurian tales were also impregnated by the model proposed by the Catholic Church. They idealized love. They preached love. They preached was of a spiritualized nature. It was Christian love, with the determining seal of loving one's neighbor as oneself. The church, with its extreme patriarchal dissociation, considered physical love to be a luxury and only to be experienced when it was at the service of procreation. The experience of love proposed by the church became an ideal, an impersonal experience. Campbell tells us of an extremely important fact he observed regarding the evolution of modern languages. Not only those of Latin origin, but also those of Germanic origin. He states that during his research, he noted important changes in grammatical structures, including the separation of the subject. It's like hurting me to sit for too long. Hold on. Okay. Language is Germanic. He states that during his research, he noted important changes in grammatical structures, including the separation of the subject, which was implicit in the verb form, as in Latin. As a result, the emphasis is on the individual in relation to the other. Consequently, new structures develop, such as JT on me. Oh my God, that's I don't get the French inflection, dialect, like at all. I know I say it so wrong, so wrong, so embarrassing. Oh my gosh. Okay, which means I love you, etc. Europe now clamored for personal experience. In courtly love, the heart was taken over by the image of another, and nothing else mattered. The emergence of this type of feeling makes explicit the polarization between the knight's honor and his duty towards the demands of his heart that transmitted an experience of individuality and was of a personalized nature. Working through this dilemma, this is what we were really feeling during Aries season, where we have the sign of the self in opposition to the full moon in Libra of the other, right? Or was that? Explicit in the polarization between the knight's honor and his duty towards the demands of the heart that transmitted experience of individuality and was of a personalized nature. Working through this dilemma would result in the salvation of the soul of the new epoch. Courtly love represents the possibility of recovering the feminine banished from consciousness and makes the search for the precarious chalice the symbolic expression of the demand to integrate the feminine. Now, the great goddess explicitly expresses the ongoing process of transformation as a reality, far closer to encouraging the structuring consciousness of the post-patriarchal dynamic, or what's known as the dynamic of the heart. She goes into, I don't know if she goes into that in the next chapter, but she talks about we're in this like post-patriarchal age, right? Where we're this Western consciousness is shifting from this patriarchal dominance back home to the feminine, but we're not going all the way back there, right? We're making some sort of middle ground, some new epoch that is a balanced epoch. And she talks about this epoch being the epoch of the heart and the epoch of like union and individuation at the same time, which is pretty much what this whole thing, being a human thing, is all about, I think. Who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. Okay. The next chapter is the search for one's self, chapter 5. So we're gonna dive into that one right now. Oh my gosh, I have a lot of notes in this one. This one is really good. I think if you guys are on Patreon, I've already read this chapter to you guys. I think I read this one and the one on Merlin. I can't remember. I know I've read you guys parts of this book already because it's really that good. Okay, give me a second, guys. It's 11:30. We'll probably go at least one more chapter, maybe two. Okay. The search for oneself. This is another quote from Eros and Psyche. The sleeping princess. waits herself. Sleeping, she waits. In death, she dreams her life. And her forgotten brow is adorned with green wreath of ivy. Who is the sleeping princess in Fernando Pessoa's? That's so wrong. Who is the sleeping princess that Fernando Pessoa sang about in one of his most beautiful poems, the poem Eros and Psyche? The sleeping princess waits. That is, she is waiting for herself, who comes in the form of an impetuous young boy, arrogant of himself, and unaware of the purpose of his journey. Ignorant of himself and unaware of the purpose of his journey, and breaking the doomed path, dizzy from what had been, his head swimming, he raises his hand and finds ivy, and sees that he was the princess who was sleeping. Okay. This poetic expression couldn't be more accurate in describing the symbols of the anima animus, the structuring archetype of the heart dynamic, or the dynamic of otherness. I feel like I have to hiccup, but I also, don't. Okay. The desperate search for the sleeping princess demonstrates the search for the feminine that has been banished from consciousness, the reintegration of the great goddess, exiled by the defensive patriarchal dynamic. The Grail, a symbol of the container of abundance, inspiration, and wisdom, offers the best expression of the symbol of the structuring feminine in the psyche of the new epoch. Given the various characteristics of the precious chalice, the first symbolic reading of the Grail legend is understood as the search for and attempt to integrate the feminine, which had for so long been cut off from consciousness as a result of defensive dynamics. The sacred chalice as a symbol illustrates the hierophany. I looked this word up earlier. It's like a derivative of the hierophant. It means divinity incarnate. Hierophany. Yeah, maybe I'm not saying that right. Who knows? It means divinity incarnate. Expression of the great goddess. So the great goddess incarnate here on earth, right? A symbol of her here. Its recovery represents the integration of the feminine cut off from the psyche. The legends from the Arthurian cycle and the numerous expressions of the search for the Grail can be understood symbolically as the search for sacred knowledge. The expression of the same phenomenon also emerges in another form with the Gnostic movement and also through the alchemical process. Thus, the Grail is the search to find oneself, expressing the dynamic of incarnato. I have no idea. That word we were trying to say earlier. Whatever. The marriage of a love, joining together individuals to transform the relationship. The symbol of other becomes more discriminated in consciousness and integrated. An integration of the alma anima is made possible. I'm not sure what she means by the alma anima. I hope she goes into it. I can't remember. Buddha teaches that life is an expression of suffering. And where there is suffering, there is life. The symbolic encounter between one individual and another produces mortification and the joy of transformation. The feelings experienced and the suffered represented the moment of symbolic death of ego, solitary to ego solitary. What? The feelings experienced and suffered represent the moment of symbolic death of ego solitary to ego solitary. I don't know what that means. From ego solitary to of ego solitary to ego solitary? I have no idea. Okay, we're going to move on. I don't know what she's talking about. The abandoning of the impersonal to the uniqueness of being integrated within the ego thou by choice. Suffering and joy is known in, I wish I knew how to say this, I have no idea. When everything merges together. Suffering is the source of transformation for humans. However, the symbolic structuring of one's personality occurs in the polar opposite with joy. There's no transformation without the union of suffering and joy. To search and discover the other reveals the wonder of realizing the divine is present in all of us. When I was reading this last time, I wrote the glyphs for Cancer and Leo by that line up there above. There is no transformation without the union of suffering and joy. Leo and Cancer are on the same axis. They're opposite each other. Leo governs the sun. Cancer governs the moon. Cancer governs our traumas and our subconscious and the depths of the individual self. And Leo literally governs joy. And so I guess that's why I wrote that there. I'm not sure. I thought I'd share that. Okay. To search and discover the other reveals the wonder of realizing the divine is present in all of us. The quest means to search for divinity in the other, through the other, and by the other, in order to discover the divine in ourselves. Discovering the divine in the other through relationships is perhaps the greatest treasure obtained from the search for the Grail. This is the magic moment in the history of the world. The human being searches for another, for his or her divine essence, and searching for him or her discovers divinity within. The quest for the Grail, desired by all of us, continues to fascinate, provoke emotions, and represents, perhaps, for each of us, a symbol that has still not been structured in our consciousness of the ego-other complex. Thus, the Grail represents the greatest symbolic emergence of how the other, sought through the heart, can transform us. It's kind of like what I was trying to explain with the fifth element tangent I went on, but I don't know if I really actually made my point. But if that's a really good movie, if you guys haven't seen it, you should watch that movie. It's a good one. Okay, the search for this precious object represents an archetypal theme and is part of humanity and the history of mankind. Recovering it means returning to both nature and a time of the great goddess, and also to religion with its primordial structural values which have been deteriorated over time. Initially, Christianity had these pure intentions, based on the assumption that the divine could be found through another. The search for the Golden Age and the period of harmony occurred while Arthur reigned with his queen and his kingdom was under the rule of justice. The search did not end with Arthur or the Grail legend, but a theme that is returned to, but it is a theme that is returned to constantly. The Jews searched for the promised land. The states searched for liberty. And the world searched for its integration. In the time of Arthur, his knights went in search of the chalice. Almost all of them failed. There are a couple of legends where people did find the Grail. But there are also legends about those exact same knights not finding the Grail, so, grain of salt. But they all have their own lesson and, trial and tribulation that needed to, be overcome, whether it was or not. We learn a lot through people's faults. So almost all of them failed. Perhaps, but even if they did fail, that ultimate quest, the Grail quest, the knights that failed had many quests leading up to that they passed, these initiations that they passed, that are like the archetypal energy that night represents and the lessons it has to hold. And it shows how like they're all at different levels of consciousness. But ultimately, all of these things are within the self, right? So these are all just fractals of consciousness that we're working to integrate. They're, just because they failed doesn't mean that they don't hold wisdom in and of themselves for what they do represent. Almost all of them failed, perhaps because they were not fully inspired with the purity and purpose of their search. When we're talking archetypes, not all of them can be pure and aligned with this middle path pillar of truth and sovereignty, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have any of our polarities. We need to have things that fall on either side. We need to have things that aren't pure, right? Not the best word, but you know what I mean. They're almost all of them failed. Perhaps because they were not fully inspired with the purity and purpose of their search. Only one of the knights managed to fulfill the task. Depending on the version of the tale, sometimes it's Percival, sometimes it's Galahad, and sometimes it's Boris. Galahad, whose name is derived from Hebrew and means heap of witness, is considered to be the most pure of all. He's the son of Gawain, usually. Gawain kind of fails the mission, but then like his son Galahad kind of usually is the one who finds the Grail after his dad kind of failed at finding the Grail. And so it kind of speaks to like how, you know, the generation before got as far as it could, and then, you know, the next generation, we teach it everything we know, and the next generation can evolve farther, right? Through the healing that the ancestral line has done prior to it. It helps our children to get farther than we did, you know? Okay. Galahad is usually considered the purest of them all. Sometimes Percival is too. Percival is more like that younger, naive purity of like the childhood innocence. And then like Galahad is more that like pure, like knightly, virtuous soul. Okay. Together with Percival and Boris, they were the three knights that, right after a long and difficult journey, he arrived at the Grail Castle. Galahad arrived at the Grail Castle with Percival and Boris. Boris. B-O-R-S. Boris. Maybe? Who knows? Where you don't hear about him a lot. Usually the ones I'm familiar with are Galahad and Percival. You don't really hear about his a lot. I think she does go into it here. So they arrived at the Grail Castle, the three knights, and they were enamored with what met their eyes. Galahad is celebrated as soon as he arrived. Then he died, pure of heart. Percival became king of that castle, while Boris returned to Camelot to retell the exploits of his companions. Whether it was Galahad, Percival, or whoever that symbolically reached the Grail, the search is always made in stages. In the legend of Percival, the young knight described as a pure, naive fool arrived at the Grail Castle earlier. It was guarded by the Fisher King, but he was unable to ask the right question, perhaps because he had been taught by his mother not to ask questions, or perhaps to avoid being considered a nuisance, or even because he did not have sufficient courage to break with what the collective expected of him. When he awoke the next day, the castle and everything else had disappeared. This version of the legend makes us realize the importance of always asking questions. Not asking questions means continuing to adopt a hypocritical attitude, as this means not challenging what needs to be challenged or doing what is praised by others. The fact that Percival did not ask questions represents a betrayal of his own process of growth and a denial of the possibility of discovering his true self. Not asking the questions is to lose oneself and not fulfill one's destiny. Percival, by giving in to the rules and what was collectively correct, symbolically represents Arthur's shadow, which had developed over the centuries through Paul's denial, Judah's betrayal, Lancelot's doubts, and Joseph of Arimathea's lack of faith, and made explicit in the Fisher King's incurable wound. In the symbolic feeling of analytical psychology, the shadow of Arthur and his mistakes, his conflicts, and his incompetence was previously portrayed in Paul's denial, Judas' betrayal, and just a new attitude will be able to change the consciousness of Arthur and the world and the collective. Arthur will need to let his defensive attitude be only his duties and be open with all his difficulties denied to the relationship with the other. I don't know. I highlighted it last time I read this. I don't know. It sounded important last time. Let me read this sentence again. Okay. This might be the last chapter. Arthur will need to let his defensive attitude be only his duties and be open with all his difficulties denied to the relationship with the other. Percival and the Fisher King emerged in the legend as complementary figures, or even as Arthur himself. To understand these correlations, we need to return to the legend. The Holy Grail was guarded in a castle whose king had been injured during his adolescence. It speaks a lot to the archetype of Chiron and this incurable wound that's ultimately affecting the fertility of the land, because the wound is really the disconnection of the feminine, and when you're disconnected from the feminine, you're disconnected from the land and the abundance that it offers. Okay, I don't know if that's where she's going to go. Oh, I wrote Chiron here. Chiron, wounds. Okay, where am I at? The Holy Grail was guarded in a castle whose king had been injured in his adolescence. When he was wandering through the forest, he came upon a salmon roasting and on a spit, and starving, he helped himself to a piece. When he did this, he burnt his fingers. And then on, he was called the Fisher King, since he was injured by a fish. Over time, the legend had been expanded, and one story tells that the king had also been injured in the groin, and consequently could no longer procreate. Due to this injury to the king, the country also became sterile. It speaks a lot to the fertility aspect as well, right? The Fisher King remains bedridden and worships the Grail, but he cannot touch it and he cannot be cured of his injuries. The king will only be cured, according to a prophecy made by the court jester, when a fool appears. Someone totally innocent and pure of heart. Only he will be able to liberate the king and the castle and the Grail. Percival was still an adolescent, looked after by his mother, and according to Troyes, removed from any contact with the civilized world. Heart Sorrow, Percival's mother, had raised him in total ignorance of the world. One day, during one of his walks, Percival comes across a group of distinguished knights wearing suits of armor and brandishing shiny swords. When he sees them, he feels he is in the company of divine creatures, as if the knights were angels of the Lord, overcome by intensity of an emerging symbol, demanding ego structuring. He dares to ask the question of another that he then asked of himself. Who are you? The answer came quickly. We are Arthur's knights. This revelation unleashed a rush of desire and feelings he had never experienced. Together with this awakening of new feelings and desires came a certainty that he had to become a knight. Percival was overcome with the emotion of discovery and, unaware of his knowledge, began to search for his destiny, asking the divisive question, what do I need to do to become a knight? His heart was full of doubt. A lot of other questions could have been asked, but at the moment, Percival's consciousness was only capable of doing what had to be done. The archetypal structures mobilized, but by the remarkable vision, started to come to the fore, demanding the symbolic space necessary to develop his personality. An overwhelmed ego needs time to develop. Everything else has to wait the place of life. He was fascinated by the reply he received since it touched his soul deeply, giving meaning to his existence and leaving him without any further questions to ask. You have to go. The King Arthur's court. See, okay, this is translated from Portuguese into English, and I think there are some typos. This is like the third one that I've come across that I'm like, this was written wrong. Okay, you have to go to, it says the King Arthur's court, but I think the needs to be removed. You have to go to King Arthur's court and ask to be made a knight. Percival was elated with his discovery, and on returning home to his mother, he announced he was leaving. Heart Sorrow was desperate. After all, her husband, Percival's father, had died as a knight in the Crusades. His mother feared losing her son if he went away. Perhaps he would never return. Leaving her alone again in her heart, she wanted to continue being a mother by preventing her son from growing up. I don't want you to go, she insisted. You could die like your father. For the first time, Percival heard his mother talk about the real facts of his father's life. Discovering that he had been a knight, he was even more resolved to leave for Camelot, following the demands of his anima. At this moment, Heart Sorrow represents the devouring and incestuous feminine side of the Great Mother, which was an obstacle to the emerging hero, instigator of the search for the feminine soul, redeemer, and transformer. Percival is adamant, but in the area of the unconscious, the battle is restrained. The hero fights against the devouring dragon and manages to obtain the consent of his personal mother. Before he leaves, the Great Mother, through the words of Heart Sorrow, instructs him on how to behave. He should remain pure of heart, protect the weak, fear the maiden that laughs, and most importantly, not ask questions. During his first encounter with the Grail, this maternal instruction prevails, and Percival is unable to ask the expected and necessary questions. What is the secret of the Grail? Who does it serve? Or who serves the Grail? From the young boy who, overcome by the hero archetype, had dared to leave his mother's home and become dedicated knight of the Round Table and go in search of the Holy Grail, Percival had traveled a long path. Between the duty imposed by the collective and the demands of his soul, he had followed his inspiration with the passage of time. However, his ambitions waned and his desires fallen to the wayside. When he came face to face with the symbol that had been so desired, perhaps he forgot his calling and meaning, as he was so enmeshed in the details of his journey. It is worth remembering the tale told by Campbell about the conflict faced by Buddha at the time of his... Oh my god, I have a lot of notes written here. Okay, hold on. At the time of his ritualistic initiations, the great... You guys, I like writing glyphs. I don't even know what I have written here. Okay, I'm just going to try to read what she wrote. Ritualistic initiations. The Great Mother was in a state of deep meditation under the bo tree when the Great Master, she's talking about Buddha. The Great Master was in a state of deep meditation under the bo tree when he was tempted, as Christ would be. Buddha was tempted 3 times. The first temptation was luxury, which Buddha resisted without much difficulty. The second was fear, which he was also able to overcome. The third and last temptation was that of duty, which was the most difficult of all to resist. When the devil appeared, he announced to Buddha, "Prince, your country is being invaded, and you need to return to take command of your armies. It is your duty to defend your country, your people, your family. Everyone awaits you." This was the greatest and most difficult of all of the temptations faced by Buddha. By not fulfilling the task imposed on him and not doing what was expected of him by the collective, Buddha was able to avoid being fettered by duty. Everyone is told to do your duty. According to Buddha, this is the most dreadful of all moments, and not submitting to this imposition means breaking the vicious cycle of conditioning, which we have all been subjected to since birth. The temptations faced by the knights refers to the conflict between the duty towards the collective and the soul's claims for transformation. To find the Grail requires the joy and courage to dare. Arthur was about to get married when he is informed that his future wife, Guinevere, the daughter of King Leo de Grace, had been abducted. The future queen, the great mother goddess, had been abducted by the lord of the castle. That is, Guinevere had been symbolically taken to the underworld for her initiation rites to be transformed a girl into a woman. Arthur, according to Celtic myth, is also known as the Great Lord Artros. In other words, the Great God Bear. And as such, holds temporal power. I had a whole video, I don't know where I went off on this, but I was talking about the constellations and the Arthurian myths and how the pole star is the Holy Grail and how it is encircled by the bear. It is part of the little bear constellation, so like the divine child bear, and the future king, right? And the great bear is actually representative of like the mother bear, the mama bear, right? And how those constellations, including the dragon, and Arthur's last name is Pendragon usually, are all there around the polar star, along with the king constellation, the queen constellation, Cassiopeia, all there around and the maiden that needs saving, Andromeda, plus the hero archetype Perseus. Those are all there around the pole. I went off on this whole tip in some video. I don't know which one, or I would kind of direct you guys there. Anyway, Arthur means bear. The great bear, and as such holds power as a priest and servant of the goddess Artemis. During ritualistic periods, he acquires spiritual power and is represented by the sacred stag and wild boar. And I wrote here that in my family crest, my dad's side, one of his ancestral lines has the boar. It says here the wild boar. I wrote here that's my family crest. I have the boar. One of my family lines crests. Okay. And as such, he conquers the right to establish the sacred union with the great goddess. The stag, which represents youth and renewal, is the animal symbol of death and rebirth. expressed in the physical transformations presented throughout life. The wild boar is a representation of the goddess in her savage and spiritual form, since it feeds only on acorns of the oak tree, considered to be the tree of eternity. Consequently, the wild boar is considered to be the hunt par excellence and the favorite dish of gods and heroes, since it granted them immortality. In the legend, Guinevere had been abducted by the lord of the castle and would remain bewitched, together with the rest of the kingdom. Arthur, the emerging symbol of the great lover of the goddess, needs to rescue her to break the magical cycle of bewitchment. As king, he does not fulfill his destiny as lover, since he believes his greatest duty is to reign. Between the duty imposed by the collective conscious for him to exercise his position or becoming the hero lover, the emerging demands for transformation of the unconscious, Arthur chooses his duty towards the collective. Instead, he sent his best friend in his place, Sir Lancelot, the greatest of all the knights, to rescue Guinevere. Both Arthur and Lancelot are mythical, heroic, solar figures governed by the patriarchal dynamic. Arthur, with his sword Excalibur, shining like 30 torches, and his integrity and honesty represents the manifestation of solar divinity. Sir Lancelot, as his name indicates, is also an expression of a solar divinity. His name, Locke or Luke, means light. When Arthur and Lancelot agree to undertake their various heroic tasks, they can be seen as reflections of each other. Lancelot expresses the symbolic polar opposite of Arthur's unstructured personal consciousness. Thought and action, duty and heart, prudence and recklessness are complementary polar opposites in Arthur and Lancelot, but they are not compatible if expressed as fields of consciousness when governed by the patriarchal dynamic. Arthur, still subject to the duty of the collective, delegates to the other friend hero the rescuing of his own anima. Lancelot immediately goes to save Guinevere, wearing heavy armor. He mounts the first horse in sight and gallops away without stopping until the animal is worn out. He mounts a second horse and again whips it until it drops from exhaustion. Our hero then continues his journey without a horse. A cart taking prisoners to be judged crosses his path. Lancelot hesitates, torn between continuing on foot and taking the cart. Lancelot has to decide between his desire to seek his anima and the duty to preserve the law. The dynamic of law, order, rules, when exercised defensively, destroys the emergence of impulse from the heart that transforms the world, both the collective and personal worlds. The ruling hero feels that he is prevented from acting as an autonomous complex in the realm of patriarchal consciousness of a defensive nature. The current epoch is asking for a new standard of consciousness to emerge, to be installed, the dynamic of the heart. For this to happen, the integration of the feminine expression in the abducted goddess is essential. Lancelot decides to get into the cart, which represents a disgrace, the greatest public dishonor a man can face. Nevertheless, in the name of love, which is the feeling that has overcome him, our hero faces the shame and jumps in the cart. The queen awaits him in the castle. When he arrives, he will have to face his own initiation rites, resulting in his own transformation, lived and experienced through the disenchantment of the castle and the freeing of Guinevere. Arthur's knights are emergent heroes, subject to ritualistic initiation tests appropriate for the epoch of transformations. When the initiation of the anima desired to be humanized acting as an intermediary in the process of union. The Arthurian hero initially appears as the emergent archetype of the passage of patriarchy to the dynamic of the heart. Throughout the process of structuring consciousness as told by myths, the dutiful hero pattern has to be abandoned and replaced by the hero-lover pattern. The tests that Lancelot had to face, including sleeping in a room in a crazy bed that had sui generis characteristics. I have no idea what that means. I'm not going to look it up either because it's getting late. It had wheels instead of feet and was able to run around the room without the knights being able to catch it. Lancelot wore himself out after it until he managed to throw himself onto the bed, holding it onto it with all his strength. Sometimes that legend is Gawain. Lancelot? Sometimes they use that legend in the tellings of the mythology of Gawain, which is another one of the knights we'll get to. The bed jumped around as if it were a wild horse. The hero hung on stubbornly, and the bed eventually gave in. While lying on the bed, he started to be whipped by invisible iron bars and shot by darts coming from all directions. A vicious lion attacked him in the darkness. Lancelot fought the lion until he eventually killed it. Finally, the knight collapsed, exhausted, covered in blood. Lancelot had passed the first test. The second one was to cross the precipice that was bridged by the sharp blade of a sword. He could not tremble or hesitate, and his path was a balance between heart and duty. Henrik Zimmer comments that the tests faced by Lancelot was a way for the knight to get in touch with the feminine spirit. The feminine is crazy by nature, according to man's understanding, just like the bed. The initiation ritual undergone by the emergent hero in the guise of Lancelot belongs to the mythical moment of transformation from patriarchal to post-patriarchal consciousness, to otherness, or the dynamic of the heart. The rite and the hero are complementary realities for passing the test. The hero from the Arthurian myth is dedicated to reintegrating the feminine. Even so, he still has to fight the devouring Great Mother, as is evident in the story of Percival. As such, Lancelot completed the tasks that qualified him as capable of interacting with the feminine soul with whom he could conceive and raise a child of the new epoch. Lancelot managed to complete his task and cross the precipice, transcending the polarity. As a result, the castle was no longer bewitched, and the queen was freed. Guinevere greets him, but remains unmoved, cold, indifferent. After making such an effort, this, the greatest of all knights, did not understand the cold reception he received. Possibly the great goddess's unfriendly reaction was due to her being offended by Lancelot's hesitating to get on the cart full of prisoners. In the film Excalibur, the question of the collective duty is resumed when Guinevere, accused by the Black Knight of being adulterous, has to await the emergence of the knight to defend against the injuries suffered, for her honor to be redeemed. If the defending knight wins the claims, the queen will be considered innocent. If he loses, Guinevere will be condemned. Arthur, husband and lover of his anima, should defend his loved one from the offense suffered, as knightly honor is paramount, and since his task is to save damsels and defend the oppressed, Arthur is pressured to assume his role as hero, as a knight of the new epoch. However, he is driven towards fulfilling his destiny duty. And once again, the complex of ruling duty dominates his consciousness, and the hero lover does not manifest himself. As ruler, Arthur summons Lancelot, a knight, to defend the honor of his wife. Since his position as king does not permit him to do so, as he has to act as a judge in this trial by combat, Arthur remains with his duty destiny, assumed since birth, which prevents him from acting as lover. The feminine desired wife anima is rejected by the duty of the king. As such, it would remain the affliction of the goddess, expressed in the injured Fisher King. In a parallel story, Arthur requests that Lancelot perform the task of guardian of honor for the court of Guinevere, taking her to the royal wedding celebrations. Lancelot immediately falls in love with the future queen. In this tale, this happens during his first encounter with her. This emerging love should take precedence over everything else. However, the ruling virtue duty suppressed his impulse. Lancelot suffers a dilemma. He is Arthur's best friend, and yet desires Guinevere. The conflict between duty and courtly love then runs through the whole legend, becoming a symbolic theme of an archetypal nature, illustrating the difficulty of transformations of consciousness imposed on humanity. The discussion of the conflict between the love for a friend and the love for a lover, experienced in a love triangle between Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere, will be taken up again later. The goddess cannot accept the conflict between duty and the demands of the heart. This conflict reflects the crux of the impetus to the transformation process. The demand made by the goddess of the patriarchal consciousness, of the redemption of the patriarchal consciousness. As such, her knight cannot waver between love for the anima of an individual nature, a basic element that establishes a new dynamic of consciousness, the dynamic of the heart, and fulfilling the duty to rule. The individuation process depends on the return of the goddess to assume a position of priority, of ego-other symmetry. However, the force of the imposed duty of a collective nature which maintains the defensive patriarchal dynamic will continue to suffocate woman's greatest desire. This defense, which has developed over time and is evident in Arthur's shadow, also arises from the fear and fascination the world holds for the dynamic of the heart. How can we understand the fear and fascination of the dynamic of the heart, evident in the dynamic of consciousness of the post-patriarchal nature? The individuation of men and women occurs through the process of integration of the archetype that structures the animus, the archetypes of interrelatedness. That middle path that unites all these things together, right? All right, we're going to finish this chapter and we'll call it a night. We'll leave off on Lancelot and Arthur. Yeah, okay. Maybe we'll read one more chapter. I wanted to get to the middle. We did talk a lot in the beginning, so the next one we won't talk as much. Okay, men and women, even today, at the beginning of the 21st century, find themselves oppressed by archetypal animus demands and can no longer rely on the references that guide the structuring of the psyches of their ancestors. Although these archetypal demands are experienced as being inherent to the psyche, when they are in harmony with the collective demands, individuals experience a conflict of having to correspond to the demands of the soul without being aware that they are corresponding to their own needs. The collective, structured according to the requirements of the new demands, creates fantasies and metaphors in order to understand the central meaning of these transformations. Since the collective is unaware of their characteristics, it presents them in the form of heroic sagas, mainly the sagas from the Arthurian cycle. The demands of the collective until the beginning of the 21st century saw men and women still submitted to the weight of the complex composition that equates as exclusively male attributes: masculinity with strength, activity, results, potential, logos, etc., and as exclusively female attributes: femininity with fragility, feelings, daydreaming, etc. For men and women to overcome this opposition and transcend these polarities, they will have to undertake a transforming journey that is accompanied and permeated with the presence of characters that reflect hero, heroines, lovers, loved. For men and women to understand themselves in this new systematic complexity, they will have to abandon the old pattern of They will have to abandon the old pattern of hero duty, heroine nurturing, and in this way enter the dynamic of this new epoch, the dynamic of the heart. The structuring integration of the anima animus archetypes will be possible through a symmetrical relationship with another, either actual or symbolic. And being symmetrical, the relationship will comprise of contractual norms made and unmade regularly and agreed between the partners. Consequently, it will be possible to create a new code of ethics pertinent to the relationship established, in which the partners will be synchronistically present. This means that nothing can be lived in the dynamic between the partners without both being consulted and respected, and without being contracted in common agreement enable decisions to be taken. Sometimes I think it's so funny when I see things that I highlight. Last time I read these and I think to myself, what did I find so... I mean, that was a good line. That was good. But like, I highlighted that, I underlined it, and there's a star next to it. I'm going to read it one more time. This means that nothing can be lived in the dynamic between the partners without both being consulted and respected, and without it being contracted in common agreement enable decisions to be taken. Okay, that's good, but like, I don't think I needed all of that. Oh, okay. Sometimes things like really make a lot of sense when I'm like extra stoned, and then later I'm like, what? What? Okay. The structuring integration of the archetype of interrelation is inherent to all symmetrical relationships. With relations between lovers and friends being of great significance, this does not have to be romantic relationships. This is literally, like I said in that Libra moon, so if you're a Patreon member, you heard me say this. Like, people usually talk about Aries being the sign of the self and Libra being the sign of the relationships, because it does govern relationships and marriage, but it literally is the sign of the other, like all others, all other people, the opposition to the self. Aries, the sign of the self, its opposition Libra is the sign of the other. Any other, all other, every single other we come in contact with as we navigate this realm. Libra's an air sign. So it governs that like other consciousness, right? We have two other air signs. Aquarius also governs the other, and it also is like an air sign, but it governs like groups of people, collective consciousness. Libra is one-on-one interactions, and Gemini, the other air sign, is like the other inside us, like our other half, seeing the other side. It's a very internal mental process. Libra is where we start to see that reflection in another human being, usually one-on-one interactions. And Aquarius is when we see the other reflected in collective group consciousness. No idea why I said all that right now. What were we talking about? Where am I at? Okay, what are we talking about? Oh, that line that I heavily underlined, and then I read this one where we were talking about the significance of lovers and friends, and how the other is not just a romantic relationship, but it's literally anybody. You can see yourself reflected back in literally everybody and anybody. Okay. So since the relationships are symmetrical and governed by the archetypes of interrelationship, opposite experiences are possible since each of the partners can know themselves in the position of the other. The hero of the new epoch arises as the emerging archetype. I know you guys were talking about like twin flame stuff. There were like the weird stuff that went down with me and Eddie. That's what it kind of was like seeing yourself as the other, like, and seeing yourself in the other. And even sometimes like the faces when you're like tripping hard, like faces will literally merge into other people. That's always fun. Okay. Anyway. Story for another time. The hero of the new epoch. This is heavily underlined, circled with a star next to it. Let's see how freaking good it is, okay? Last time I read it, I thought this shit was fire. The hero of the new epoch arises as the emerging archetype, encouraging the passage from the patriarchal dynamic centered on law and fulfilling duty to the dynamic of the heart, centered on the search for finding oneself, even integrated and related with meeting the other. So finding yourself and the other simultaneously. The dynamic of the new times, the dynamic of the heart will occur through the alchemical operation of union for love, which joins people in prospective search for totality of the unique earth in a relational position where the individual knows how to be looked after by the other and at the same time is concerned with looking after the other and vice versa. Thus, the symbol other becomes an unalienable condition from the center of consciousness, since the individual does not exist without the other, and the other does not exist without another. Marie de France, in something very French and long, writes a very long thing in French that literally is in French, and then it translates here. I'm just going to read the translation. It's a poem, and she writes, is she going to translate that? It says here, a poem. She writes a Bella Emmy blah 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 in France, but then you'd think it would translate it after, but it just goes on to talk. You guys, I can't speak French. I'm not going to read that to you. It's kind of weird that they then whatever. Anyway, the challenge of the hero-heroine in the new epoch. The dynamic of the heart will be to transcend the hero duty, heroine nurturing polarity and become the hero, heroine, lover, loved. Not to transcend is to betray the demand of the new epoch. The demand task of the hero, heroine of the new epoch of the dynamic of the heart will be to find a path for the structuring integration of the anima-animus archetypes, which will end up being the center of consciousness that is really defined by the ego-other relationship, which is something that we've really been highlighted through Aries season, when we have that season of the self and that opposition of the Libra moon that we just moved through. So this is something that's really been highlighted over this past month. The center of consciousness established by the ego-other relationship will join the contrasting opposites, God and his consort, knowledge and verb, being and doing. Consequently, knowledge will join together with the verb and the heart with action. The demands of the collective consciousness point towards the need for transformation in the same way that the demands of the person of individuality wish for transformation. Therefore, how can we understand so much structured defense? What are the threats that afflict the personal and collective psyche such that the dynamic of the new epoch, the dynamic of the heart, is facing so many difficulties in becoming reality? Why has the hope for transformation announced by the Christian myth 2,000 years ago still not occurred? I wrote over here externalizing an internal process. I don't know what I wrote that about, but it's by that paragraph. I have no idea. Okay, the patriarchal dynamic, consolidated in norms and laws, fulfilling duties and completing tasks, offers possibility, so much security to the ego, either through discrimination of the limits previously established by code, or the predictability of the sequence of phenomenon that has resulted in the psyche remaining in the comfort of the homeostatic position of this dimension. Every time that the complex demands of the psyche come into the fore, which demand the structuring of the animus archetypes and the emerging symbols, the system is expressed in this homeorestus state. Okay, homeorestus is a word used by Jean Piaget. It presents an opposite systematic condition. This is the opposite and complementary to homeostasis. When the system, which until then was stable, homeostatic, incorporates and starts to structure acquisitions, new symbols, the systematic reality experiences a period of turbulence, apparently chaotic, when everything appears confused. Nico says, damn, she's so right. About which part? There's such a delay. I never know what you guys are talking about, like what you're referencing. Okay. I don't think I followed along with much of that paragraph. We're going to move on. What in fact happens is that transformation takes place and consciousness experiences the phenomenon as something uncomfortable, anxiety-provoking, and a threat to stability. I pointed an arrow at that and highlighted it excessively. What in fact happens is that transformation takes place and consciousness experiences the phenomenon as something uncomfortable, anxiety-provoking, and a threat to stability, which is honestly something we are going to be feeling throughout this next month as we're in Taurus season, which is a sign of stability. But we have Uranus there, the unpredictable, erratic sign of instability, planet of instability at home. We have eclipse season that's going to be right there on top of Uranus. So we're really feeling this sense of a threat to our stability that is uncomfortable and anxiety-provoking. But this helps to bring forth the process of transformation of consciousness. She says there has to be more than a contract and duty, especially in relationships. 100%. 100%. Okay. Homeoresis? No. Whatever. That's what we're going with. The opposite of homeostasis. A systematic condition that is necessary and essential for all transformation processes expresses the emergence of a more ample and more complex structural condition. The more complex post-homeoresis system follows on from a state of homeostasis, which in turn will give rise to a new homeoresis and will continue excessively. What, lady? I don't know. That's a mouthful. Maybe it makes more sense in Portuguese. Okay. As such, the psyche as a whole is transformed and structured, and consciousness of oneself and the other is amplified. That makes sense. We understand that for each new symbol that emerges in the psyche, which seeks to structure consciousness, stagnation defenses come into play, demanding that the comfortable state be maintained. That's something Taurus really wants. Taurus wants to stay comfortable and secure. And it already doesn't like Uranus being here, kind of shaking things up in that house, the house that's ruled by Taurus. Look at your chart for a little insight into that. But this eclipse season is really going to be shift. It's raining. Like really loud out there. How weird. Okay. What was I saying? Taurus season. It's focused on our security, and right now this is like going to be the least secure Taurus season ever, and we have erratic shifts happening from not only Uranus, which is there to push us forward and awaken us through like electric, unpredictable, weird things that come to rattle us, and then eclipse season too. So then we have fate and destiny taking the reins. So at least it's not just like erratic like Uranus, which is always trying to push us forward, but like to what end, you know? Really doesn't matter what end, just forward in a new direction. But when the eclipses come into play, that's really where fate and destiny kind of take the reins. She says she can hear, you guys can hear the rain? I can turn this up. Oh, my volume is like literally all the way up. Am I really loud, guys? My volume thing is like literally all the way up. Oh, she's a Taurus. Miko is a Taurus sun and a Taurus rising. And so you're really feeling this in that first house of the self. Yeah, but these are big, huge, good changes. Like they're going to be, Taurus is a fixed sign. You guys don't like to, you have to hold that fixed energy. You're not initiating something new like cardinal. You're not shifting into something new like mutable. You're there fixed and sturdy and solid and dependable, you know. But when it comes to change, like fixed signs don't really like it too much. So it might be uncomfortable, but like it says here, what in fact happens is the transformation takes place and consciousness experiences the phenomenon of something uncomfortable, anxiety provoking, and a threat to stability. These things help bring about transformation. Okay. The demand of the new epoch, the demand of the heart, implies being concerned about relationships and therefore about oneself and others. The demand of the new epoch, based on the Christian preaching of loving one's neighbor and oneself, demands that the amount of love, care, and attention towards another should be the same as given to oneself. It's all about balance, right? The value of the other necessarily becomes part of the value of the ego, so that decisions can be taken. The needs of the individual and the other will be prioritized. She said, that's Taurus right there. That's the most Taurus statement I've ever heard in my entire life. She says, I just want to lay on a luxurious bed after a luxurious bath all day. My dad is a Taurus sun, moon, rising. He's all three of his big threes are Taurus, and he's got other things there. I just don't know off the top of my head. And my mom is a Sag. My mom's got a little Sag stellium. And Sag is a masculine sign. It's a fire sign. And Taurus, even though it's like the bull, right? You would think it'd be masculine. It's a feminine sign. It's Venus ruled. Every tool in the house was my mother's. My dad didn't get any of his own tools. He never fixed anything. He never did anything. He got some eventually after my mom left him when I was an adult. He had to start to learn to do things for himself. But he is the most feminine, most luxurious, loves pretty things, usually attributed to film. But yeah, he's such a Taurus. You guys like food and relaxing and all of creature comforts of life, you know what I mean? And all of the fancy things. Yeah, he's a Taurus and he's fucking stubborn. Oh my God, so stubborn. Hi, Dad, if you watch this. He is subscribed to my YouTube channel. Whatever. I talk more shit on YouTube. I mean, on Patreon, so you could pay for that content, Dad. Okay, just kidding. Anyway, onward. Loving one's neighbor. We talked about that. Oh, giving as much love to oneself as another person, right? So the value of the other necessarily becomes part of the value of the ego, so that decisions can be taken. The needs of this individual and the other will be prioritized. The decisions based on knowledge of oneself and of the other are structured to meet the needs of oneself and the other. The demands of the new epoch overwhelm the psyche, which is accustomed to what is correct and stable, since it is based on the... I'm realizing that window is open, and that's why I can hear that, because I was painting in here. That window is open. It's fine. It'll be fine. Okay. What was I saying? Epoch, overwhelming demands of the psyche, which is accustomed to what is correct and stable, which is based on the assumption that the only constant factor of this new epoch is change, in which everything is questioned by the individual and by the other. The withdrawal of projections, the fundamental condition for the dynamic of the new epoch, the dynamic of the heart, overwhelms the ego and consciousness with the numerous symbolic polarities, which until then had been projected onto another. It is no longer possible to govern oneself only based on basic assumptions. The other, his values and assumptions, now comprise the center consciousness of the individual. The decisions taken in the relationship will be, therefore, realities that include the demands of both. The challenges of the hero, heroine, lover, loved to overcome the stagnating defenses that prevent the new epoch of the dynamic of the heart from being installed are symbolically described in the questions proposed by the Grail legend. In the stories of the knights and their tales, we are given descriptions of initiation rituals, which will be considered in the coming chapters. The next chapter is chapter 6, Lancelot, Arthur, and Guinevere. And let me see how long it is. If it's short, we'll read it now. If it's long, we'll see. It's short. Okay, let's read that now, and then we'll leave off on the goddess and the sacred chalice, which makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, you have a huge dragonflies are very important to me. I'm not going to tell you why, because it's a very long story. But dragonflies are very important to me. And she says a huge dragonfly just flew onto her patio ceiling. Like 5-inch wingspan. Oh my gosh. That sounds like a good omen. Yeah. I really want to know about their triad. Look up... There's a lot of different people who do like animal symbolism, but the one I vibe with the most, his name is Ted Andrews. So look up animal symbolism, dragonfly, Ted Andrews, and type in his name in Google and see what he has to say about dragonflies. I love his symbolism the best. Okay, so like I said, this is a short little, only like 4... Wait, okay, yeah, only like 4 pages. I went too far. It's this way. Okay, so Lancelot, Arthur, and Guinevere. You're welcome. Thanks for coming here and letting me read to you. This is like all I really want to do is read books and smoke weed and talk about the sky. And yeah. So that's what we're going to do. I've read this book before. This book was really good. This is, like I said, the reason Books and Bogs exists is because this book was so good that I wanted to like read it to everybody. That last chapter was a mouthful, and I think she repeated herself a lot. But still liked it. Yeah, Ted Andrews is really rad. And he was recommended to me by this native shaman medicine woman lady who I met. And she was really awesome too. And so I was like, well, I don't know anything about that kind of stuff. So if you say that he's good, then I like it. And then I started looking into stuff, and I've always vibed with it. Okay, so this is from Comtesse Marie de Champagne, and it says, beautiful friend, like us, neither you without me or me with you. The myths from the Arthurian cycle present heroes with qualities that had not been found before. These heroes announce the passage from the patriarchal dynamic, the conscious pattern of duty and fulfilling task, to the post-patriarchal dynamic of otherness, of ego other as the center of consciousness, the dynamic of the heart, the container of the seal, and loyalty as the sovereign principles. Serving another does not imply submission, but rather choice, dedication, serving for love and for friendship. According to Thomas Mallory, Lancelot was the son of King Ban Benwick, one of the loyal protectors of King Arthur. King Ban, involved in a war with the neighboring kingdom, the king of Claudius, was beaten by the latter and had to escape with his queen. When he was escaping, Ban looked behind and saw his house in flames. He fainted and never awoke. Queen Elaine, holding her son by the hand, took him to the edges of the lake. The Lady of the Lake adopted the boy and took him to the land of Avalon. The boy was known as Lancelot of the Lake, Lancelot du Lac. When he was 18, Lancelot, already a distinguished knight, met with his cousins Bors and Lionel, and his half-brother Ector, and the four of them went to Camelot. Arthur, in gratitude to King Ban and affection for Lancelot, granted him the title of knight on St. John's Day. As knight, Lancelot's main task was to bring Guinevere, Arthur's fiancée, to Camelot for the wedding. During this trip, Guinevere and Lancelot fell in love. In other tales, Guinevere was already at the court when Lancelot arrived. He quickly became one of her knights and member of the queen's group of faithful shield bearers. After Lancelot had successfully completed various tasks, he became recognized as the best knight of all. According to Christian de Troyes, I don't know. I've butchered it multiple different ways. One of them's got to be right. Okay. When Guinevere was abducted, the son of King Bagdemagus, Lancelot changed after him, armed, but had to ride in the famous cart, which caused him such immense disgrace. Arriving at the castle of the abductor, Bagdemagus and Guinevere then begged him to stop the fight when Menegaius's life was in danger. Who knows if any of those are right? Who knows? We're just going to move on. Lancelot ascended to the request of the queen. Later, Menegaius. No, oh my God. Can we look up this guy's name, you guys? I don't know. What? Ceremonies. He's the antagonist. Yeah, but how do you pronounce it? Oh, I hate when it doesn't just pop up on Google. Whatever, we're going to move along. I like to just hit the little sound button. Yeah, I'm constantly looking up how to pronounce things, you guys. I never used to care. But now when I have to, like, talk to you guys on the internet and, like, convey my thoughts to another person, now it kind of matters how I pronounce stuff. I used to just make up the words in my mind. It doesn't matter. This guy isn't going to be offended. I got his name wrong. Okay, anyway. So he is an antagonist king. Menegaius. No, totally wrong. We're going to go with Menegaius. Not even close, but we're going to go with it. Later, he accused Guinevere of having an affair with Sir Kay. And once again, Lancelot fought Menegaius. His father once again begged for his son's life, but Lancelot finally killed this guy during a fight in King Arthur's court. During their journey back to Camelot, Lancelot and Guinevere became lovers, but Lancelot, mortified by the forbidden love, leaves Camelot and continues with his adventures. He visits King Pelles who is seen as the guardian of the Grail, and saves his daughter, Elaine de Corbec, from a boiling bath where she has been imprisoned through a bewitchment for several years. Elaine falls in love with Lancelot, her serving woman. Dame Brusson tricks Lancelot, making him believe that Elaine was Guinevere. Lancelot then sleeps with Elaine, and this is how Galahad is conceived. Because Galahad is Lancelot's son. I thought it was Gawain's son. I think, okay. Sometimes Arthurian legends are told so many different ways that I think she may even go into this here just a little bit down. Sometimes it's Gawain's son and sometimes it's Lancelot's son. But Gawain is usually Arthur's cousin, oftentimes. Okay. Lancelot returns to Camelot. Sometime later, Galahad appears and both go in search of the Holy Grail, father and son. Lancelot had several visions of the chalice and eventually finds the door to the chapel where it is kept. He is visited by an angelic presence and for several weeks remained in a trance. During this period, he realizes that his search is at an end, and the reason for his failure is that his love for Guinevere is greater than his love for God. For some time, Lancelot is determined to renounce his love for Guinevere. But as soon as he returns to court, his love is rekindled. Lancelot and Guinevere decide to end their relationship. However, they are talking in the queen's room. However, while they are talking in the queen's room, they are discovered by Mordred, which is the illegitimate son of Arthur, which I think they're going to go into a lot later. I could go off on a whole tip, but I'm just going to keep reading. Lancelot escapes, but Guinevere is condemned to death. The hero returns to defend her. Mordred overhears the conversation between Lancelot and Guinevere and denounces them to the king. This starts a war between Lancelot and Arthur, which only ends when the best of all the knights returns to Camelot to help Arthur and fight Mordred. Lancelot returns to his friend Arthur, but arrives too late to save him from the fatal blow. When the war against Mordred is over, Lancelot visits Guinevere one more time. She is now in a covenant. After lying down his arms, Lancelot becomes a hermit and lives alone for the rest of his life. Then he dies, and he is cremated in Joyous Gard. Lancelot is known as the Knight of the Cart, which he passes the most difficult test during his initiation rite, getting on the cart. A symbol. What's interesting is the constellation of the bear, which is like the Great Bear, the Big Dipper, right? That circles the little bear and the pole star in the sky, is sometimes known as the bear, but it's also sometimes known as the cart. You see how it looks like a little cart that you can jump in, like the Big Dipper? So it's interesting that they were talking earlier about how Lancelot and Arthur are like the same consciousness, right? Just different expressions, different paths taken, and how one is Arthur is attributed to the bear, and Lancelot is attributed to the cart, and both of them are names for the Big Dipper constellation that moves around the pole star, which I think is the Holy Grail. Okay, what was I saying before I went off on a tip? No idea. Where was I at? Something about a cart. Where was the cart? Mordred. We're talking about Mordred. The war and... Okay, Lancelot, he wins to... Oh, the cart. Lancelot is known as the Knight of the Cart, since he passed the most difficult test during his initiation rite. Miko says that the Big Dipper is literally the one constellation that you can see in the sky right now from where I am. That's really cool. It was really cloudy when I went outside earlier. I always look up. I couldn't even see the moon. I couldn't see anything. Just clouds. Now it's pouring rain, so I definitely probably can't see anything. But I'm glad you can. Makes me happy. Okay. The Knight of the Cart. since he passed the most difficult test during his initiation rite, getting on the cart, a symbol of infamy. And as a result of this act, he receives the scorn of everyone. However, this was the only way to find out where Guinevere was. Lancelot hesitated for an instant, and this delay, although short, cost him a great deal of suffering. The hero eventually gets into the cart, driven by love. Lancelot personifies the search for the loved one, the search for the anima. Guinevere can be considered a mythological figure who represents the sovereignty of England. Thus, she would be a hypothesis of Eru, the Irish goddess of sovereignty. Eru. Yeah, I think that's how you say that. Therefore, Guinevere represents not only the bride of flowers, but also the goddess of sadness, or the wounded dame, who suffer, which would be like Andromeda too, which is an energy we've been really leaning into in the sky, who suffers the consequence of the disputes for power and the barbarities committed by the invaders, and from the foolishness of men and women who are not prepared to accept the challenge of the new epoch. Arthur opted for the duty to reign, but did not free his anima from imprisonment. Even knowing that Guinevere was in love with Lancelot, he refused to accept this in front of others. Given his affection for Lancelot, liberating his anima would mean losing a friend. Symbolically, this complementary double, Mordred's acquisition, made Mordred's acquisition made the issue of adultery and betrayal public. When Arthur fulfills his destiny, he betrays his anima and his friendship with Lancelot. Guinevere retreats to a covenant, losing her soul? What? Aren't you supposed to connect more to your soul in a covenant? I mean, isn't that like the whole point? Like to connect to God? Whatever, anyway. Guinevere retreats to a covenant and she loses her soul. Lancelot, alerted by angels, is punished for his love. Considered an adulterer by the collective, he succumbs to the role of the guilty party, illustrating the coercive morality that still had a hold on him. Lancelot betrays his anima, and the love triangle remained unresolved. Perhaps the integration of the anima animus, the configuration of the search for self-knowledge, will only occur through the sacrifice of Lancelot, Guinevere, and Arthur. Each mythical character, a symbolic expression of the demands to transcend patriarchy. Filled with defiance, since it contains the dictates of the dynamic of the heart. Find salvation in the search for profound knowledge, as I described in the paper, Depression, the pain of the soul of those who have lost themselves. Sounds good. Okay. She goes on a tip on Orpheus. So the myth of Orpheus is often offered as a present from the gods, since it encourages us to understand this phenomenon. Oh, okay. This is from her paper. I see what she's saying. Okay. So hold on. I'm going to read that thing before. Each mythical character, a symbolic expression of the demands to transcend patriarchy, filled with defiance, since it contains the dictates of the dynamic of the heart. Find salvation in the search for profound knowledge, as I described in the paper, Depression is the pain of the soul, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The myth of Orpheus is offered as a present from the gods, since it encourages us to understand this phenomenon, to access profound knowledge, and reach a symbolic understanding of the contents of one's own life. I'm not sure how much of the myth she goes into, but the myth of Orpheus is about like traveling to the underworld like it's like a hero's journey to the underworld to like find yourself and deal with like ancestral stuff too. And yeah, that's like a good summary. Okay. This understanding gives back the individual to himself, makes the connection with the self, and makes the symbolic union with oneself as a marriage through Sophia. Orpheus is like has a lot to do with like the killing of the ego and the union with the Great Mother, but in a strange story. Okay. The cognito, which is that Latin word that I cannot say, that is about like coagulating or whatever, through Sophia. So the union through Sophia reminds us of Orpheus, the hero, after a long trip, returns home and discovers that his wife has died, bitten by a snake. Orpheus, without Eurydice, feels lost from himself and decides to descend in the underworld to recover her from the kingdom of the dead. Orpheus's journey to the kingdom of Hades is seen as his initiation rite in his individuation process. Whoever wants to penetrate the kingdom of the depths will have to symbolically die and be reborn in a new epoch. Whoever descends into the underworld never again returns, since whoever returns as another being, as someone reborn. Orpheus sings and charms everyone who listens to him. He plays his harp with the skill of a master. He has to play it to a three-headed dog. That's where they get it from, Harry Potter, Fluffy. It's from this myth. He plays his harp with great skill of a master. Unsophisticated son of Apollo, the god of music, art, medicine, and healing, of order, law, justice, of solar vision. He's the son of the sun. Orpheus can be considered to be the symbolic double of Apollo, inflated, perhaps by the power of his art, and having moved both Persephone and Hades with his music, melody, and passion to get Eurydice? I don't remember how to pronounce his wife's name, but I think it's Eurydice. No, I don't think that's right, but it's close. He wants to get her back, right? However, there's one condition. He could not look back or remain in the past, and in this way he would return changed by the ritualistic transformation. Orpheus was married to Eurydice, I think that's it. Eurydice. I think I got it. By trying to recover her from the kingdom of the dead, he was recovering himself, and therefore transformed by the symbolic union with the anima. But Orpheus hesitated, and his doubts made him look back, and his anima, Eurydice, was lost to the kingdom of the dead. Perhaps overcome by egoic inflation, Orpheus was unable to achieve his union with his anima. His youth did not give him the skills for such a great challenge, and as a result, he did not trust the present that the self offered him. The hero was overcome with sadness. He returned defeated. He no longer played his harp. He no longer sang. He rejected Aphrodite. He became depressed and lost. According to the myth, Orpheus has not given up. He continues to search, and his encounter and union with himself will be achieved through a search for profound wisdom, a search for knowledge, by connecting through the logos of the spiritual search. The hero of the new epoch dared to ask questions and search for answers that only he could answer. The individuation process of Orpheus was achieved through spiritualized logos, and he saw the divine within himself. Eros of the carnal, material, and concrete relation with the great love, Eurydice, was transformed into love, sacred agape for Sophia. Agape is like spiritual love, like deep spiritual love. Not only has the search for the chalice, has the search for the chalice, but also the anima still has to be consummated. Okay, so we're going to leave off on chapter 7, the goddess and the sacred chalice. And we'll try to finish this book next time, maybe with a little bit less chatting. We'll see. Who knows? Maybe it'll be 3 readings. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it'll be 3 readings. Who knows? I don't know. Well, thanks for coming and hanging out with me. I always bin my books like this, you guys. I have to fix them after I'm done reading them. Thanks for... Book people are going to be like, stop that. You should see all the writing in there. I destroy these things. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me, you guys. I really appreciate it. We will meet again next month. I want to kind of... I don't know. Let's look at the calendar. I want to kind of do it near the blood moon Scorpio eclipse in the sign of the mysteries, but not too close to it because I'm going to also have a live stream. So hold on. Just knock down a giant stack of books. Eddie needs to build me my last bookshelf. I have stacks everywhere, and there's a bookshelf out there in a box that needs a build in February. May. Okay, so the blood moon eclipse is on the 15th. So I'm going to do, okay, so we'll do it the week of the 15th, but it'll be after it. Sometime after the eclipse. Maybe on the 19th maybe on the 19th. And we'll try to finish this book. But if not, we'll do it one more. This one is a lot easier to pick back up. The other one that was a story, a month later, I'm like, what the heck was going on in this book? I've read so many things since then, I have no idea what's going on. Alright guys, have a great night. I will see you next month. And if you want to come and join Patreon, we will be diving into eclipses, Beltane. I have a whole bunch of different things I want to dive into. I'm not sure exactly where we're going to go, but we are going to be talking about serpent symbolism, the awakening, pioneering, progressive energy of Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius, which is at home, which is not at home, which is definitely not at home, it's not happy there, which is in Taurus right now, and is going to be a key player in this eclipse, and some other players, some other things. It's going to be fun. I'm not really sure where it'll take me. You guys know, I just go places. Yeah, it's going to be a crazy month. For sure. Yeah, eclipses are strong, man. I'm kind of used to it. I was born in mid-eclipse season, so this is just what my life feels like. So when you guys are like, oh my god, everything's all crazy, I'm like, yeah, that's my life. Alright guys, have a great night, and I'll see you later. Bye. Yeah, see you over on Patreon.